Good evening and welcome to the Board of Education meeting for Greeley Evans School District 6. Today is the 9th day of August 2021. This meeting will now come to order. Please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Crane, will you call the roll for us, please?
Mr. Hafley?
Present.
Mrs. Mash?
Present.
Mr. Matthews?
Present.
Mrs. Mueller?
Present.
Ms. Pappas?
Present.
Mrs. Solis?
Present.
Mr. Talley?
Present.
7 members present.
Thank you, Ms. Crane. Well, we are starting school again and again in a COVID year, and so it seems like it has been a very quick summer this time, and we're excited to have our students back, excited to be back in our classrooms. Spoken to a lot of teachers, and I know that they're excited to be back. And I know a lot of you are here tonight wanting to speak on COVID protocols, but there are a few other things that I would like to let you guys know that our school district is doing before we move on to that. And one of those things, if you look in our consent agenda, and that's normally a pretty boring part of our agenda. It's a lot of contracts that we sign and our Excel bill and things like that. But there's a contract this time on our consent agenda that is a contract for some work to add 10 additional classrooms to Meeker Elementary. And what that is part of our bond issue that we passed in 2019. That was a bond issue that we passed to rebuild West High School, and hopefully a lot of people have been able to see the construction at West High School and how quickly that construction is coming along. And we're excited that will be open, hopefully, fingers crossed, this time next year. And places like McAuliffe, you can see the construction there. The new Toynton Academy out on Boomerang Golf Course, the construction at Chapelo. And there were several, Madison is another one that had major construction. We were not planning to do major construction at Meeker Elementary, but we got favorable bond pricing and are able even to eliminate quite a few more temporary classrooms than we were planning. And so we're excited about all the construction that's happening in this school district. And we're also excited tonight to have Northridge with us and to be able to honor this high school. So know that's coming up as well on our agenda. I know that we have a number of people who are wanting to speak to us tonight, so I will keep my comments short, and we'll move on to our public participation regarding agenda items. And I just want to read you a statement that I read every board meeting. The board welcomes the comments of our community members and has dedicated this portion of the agenda to provide an opportunity for the community to present brief comments or pose questions to the board related to items that are listed on tonight's agenda. Written testimony or speaker handouts must be submitted to the board secretary and not to individual board members. The board typically does not engage in discussion or provide an immediate response to the impact, but will ask district staff to respond as appropriate. The board is committed to providing a safe environment where all members of the school community are treated with dignity and respect, and expects all speakers to exercise their speech rights responsibly. The speakers will be heard in the order they signed up to speak, and comments are limited to 2 minutes. Tonight, normally, if more than one person wishes to speak on the same topic, please focus comments on providing only new information and not repeating views already expressed by other speakers. But normally, if there are more than 15 guests that are signed up, we would limit public comments to 30 minutes. We don't think that we can get everyone heard in 30 minutes tonight. I think we have something like 24 people who are going to speak on agenda items tonight. And if you all speak for 2 minutes, you can do the math on that, and that won't be 30 minutes. So I would ask you, if possible, to keep those comments under 2 minutes. That would be extremely helpful to us. But I know that you probably do have prepared remarks, and And you will have the full 2 minutes if you choose to use that. But you will only have 2 minutes, and you have a clock in front of you to use, and we will let you know when your 2 minutes are up. I think that's all that we need to say, and so we are to our first speaker tonight, and that is Ms. Jennifer Lingle, and she is a resident of District 6, parent of student enrolled in District 6, and she would like to speak on the subject of mask this school year and her perspective as an ICU nurse. Ms. Lingle.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Jen, and I am a wife and mother of 3, 2 of which who started school today. I'm also an ICU nurse, and I have seen the worst side of this pandemic. I have seen how vicious it can be, but at the same time, I thank God that our children have been spared from the worst of this. I want to thank you all for all the hard work that you all put in, our teachers for keeping our kids in school and keeping them safe. I know you guys had to make some pretty hard decisions. We also learned a lot last year about how resilient our children can be. Data presented from schools all over the nation have shown that children that tested positive for COVID caused little to no further spread within their school. And with all the things I have seen in my job, I still do not fear for my children when it comes to COVID. Being a working mom during the shutdown, trying to homeschool my child while having a newborn and a preschooler, it pushed me to my limits, but I had it good compared to others. My mind turned to the single moms and single dads, the low-income families that may have lost their jobs, and all the children who are at high risk to abuse and neglect.
Ms. Lingle, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can you speak a little bit closer to the microphone? I'm not sure if it's. We're not sure if it's working, but if you can help us out, just speak a little bit closer.
Okay.
Let's see if we can hear you a little bit better.
Okay.
Thank you.
You want me to start over? Or are you okay?
No.
Okay.
You're okay. You're okay. We'll stop your clock.
Okay. So I, with all the children who are at high risk to abuse and neglect during the shutdown, it broke my heart to think of the hardship that they were experiencing. Right now, our ICU averages between 2 to 3 COVID patients at any given time since February. But what we are seeing now is the COVID aftermath. We are seeing the collateral damage. Outside of a few COVIDs, we are full of alcoholism, overdoses, drug-related traffic accidents, and crime-related admissions. Some friends of mine who work at Children's said in 2020, Children's was a ghost town with COVID, but had a significant increase in suicide attempts, overdoses, and toxic ingestions. There is another side to this pandemic that is far more detrimental to our children than the virus itself, and that problem is that we cannot measure it with a nasal swab. Our community, our children desperately need to get back to normal. May every family be able to choose what they feel is best for their children, whether that be homeschooling, masks or no masks, vaccinations, etc. I pray that we can support one another in this regardless of our own ideas and opinions. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Lingle. Our next speaker is Ms. Rachel Irway, and Ms. Irway is a resident of District 6 and is here to speak on restricting government interference in schools regarding masks.
Good evening. My name is Rachel Irway, and as said, I am a former District 6 teacher, as well as a current mom and substitute teacher in our schools. And tonight I would like to share a few thoughts on the proposed mask mandate that we had last year and could possibly come up again this year. And there's 3 things that in my extensive research over the past year as a mom and as a substitute that I've seen, and that's masks are ineffective the way that they've been used, especially for our little children. Masks actually are harmful, and masks currently are proposed or approved under emergency use authorization only. And the first one is all statistics I'm sharing tonight have been in the handout that I sent earlier, so you can go back and reference those for anything I do share. But there are multiple studies that do show that the viral particles are too small to pass through any mask, which is why we've never masked for flu or the common cold or anything like that, because viral particles do go through those masks. There actually a CDC study and an NIH study where they went through and did a very randomized trial. It's one of the most well-known, and they concluded that masks did not reduce the incidence of the SARS-CoV-2 infection at any rate. They also do not stop viral infections, And so no mask has ever been proven to stop any viral infection, which is what COVID-19 is. However, we do have studies that have proven that the masks actually can cause harm, that the cloth face masks actually increase influenza-like illnesses because bacteria particles are 50 times larger than COVID-19 particles or viral particles in general. And so the virus can pass through the masks, but bacteria actually remains inside that mask. And so the students are breathing out. If they have COVID, they're breathing it out, but they're continuing to keep bacteria trapped. So we've seen quite an influx in bacterial infections. And then the last thing is that they are currently under emergency use authorization, which are currently illegal to enforce those based on what that is right now. So I ask that we do not pass that. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Ms. Andrea Walton. Ms. Walton is a resident of District 6, parent of a student enrolled in District 6, and is here to speak on the mask mandate.
Thank you for allowing me. I just wanted to say that I appreciated when the first emails came out that it was up to individual families to decide. It was encouraged to wear a mask, and I would just appreciate it for it to remain that way. My son was in kindergarten ABC East last year, has asthma, has glasses, couldn't play outside because he couldn't see. The masks don't do anything for the kids. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Walton. Our next speaker tonight is Ms. Kate England, and she's a parent of student enrolled in District 6 and a member of District 6 staff, and here to speak on the mask mandate.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak here tonight. My name is Kate England, and I've been an educator in District 6 for 22 years. I am currently teaching health and PE at the high school level and also have 3 children who are high school aged who will be impacted by any mask mandate decision of the district. I am asking the board and Dr. Pilch to please consider making masks a choice. My main concern is the social emotional well-being of our students and staff. As a health PE teacher in the district, I have seen firsthand the impact COVID-19 has had on our students. Like most things, it came with a huge cost. The cost is the mental, emotional, social, and physical decline of our staff and our students. I know of students and staff who now have eating disorders, extreme social anxiety, depression, lack of any type of physical exercise, weight gain, suicide attempts, and worst of all, we have lost students to death by suicide. We are now facing the challenge many students may have, which is completely giving up on school. In our health classes, we teach an intense suicide unit and partner with Northridge Behavioral Health here in town to help provide support for such a sensitive topic. The counselor from Northridge made mention that the amount of students who reached out for support from our classes was absolutely staggering. They were not allowed to share the exact number of names of students with us for obvious reasons, but we felt like we were seeing the tip of an iceberg, so to speak. Students do not wear the masks as asked in every case. They are constantly touching their faces, pulling the mask down, or flat out taking them off throughout the day. We need to start this year with normalcy. We need to see smiles again. We need to build relationships again and provide support in order to recover from this cost of the COVID-19 school year. If an individual chooses to wear a mask, I think that's great and everyone should respect that decision. For the rest of us, please do the right thing and make it a choice. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. England. Our next speaker is Ms. Nikki Avery. She's a resident of District 6, a parent of a student enrolled in District 6, and here to speak on the potential mask mandate. Ms. Avery.
Thank you. Thank you for your time tonight. I'm a mom of 2 school-age children and work in the healthcare profession as a physical therapist. Early in the pandemic, we all did the best we could with the information we had at the time. Decisions were made with the ultimate goal of protecting our most vulnerable loved ones. We have learned a lot in the last year and a half. The data is clear that it is very rare for kids 0 to 19 to experience serious illness, hospitalization, or death from COVID-19, including the latest variant. Thankfully, children are low risk, and we now have a vaccine that is readily available and easily accessible for our vulnerable community members that choose to get it. We all want kids to be safe, but safety for our kids also includes their mental and social emotional health. I realize that people have different opinions on mask mandates. We all think we're right. If we didn't, we would change our minds and then we would be right again. We feel it is important for parents to choose whether or not they would like their child to wear a face mask based on what is right for each individual family. If parents feel their child is not safe at school, there are options. If adults or students feel it is necessary to wear a mask to be safe, please wear a mask. Anyone who wears a mask should be fully supported and treated with respect. Adults and students who choose not to wear a mask should be treated with the same respect. District 6 also offers an option for children to attend an online school for those families that are more comfortable with remote learning during this time. Sticking with the plan in which masks are recommended but not required will go a long way in improving morale and restoring what kids miss most about school. Facial expressions are an important part of human connection. A smile from a peer or a teacher is very powerful. Learning has suffered, and kids desperately need to be excited about school again. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Avery. Our next speaker is Ms. Kayla Daggett. Ms. Kayla Daggett is a parent of a student enrolled in District 6 and would like to speak to the board about keeping masks optional.
Thank you. I went to a meeting a few weeks ago with several parents from District 6. I heard devastating stories of dropping out, suicide attempts, eating disorders, and debilitating anxiety as a result of COVID policies. It is with the utmost concern for the students of District 6 that I am here. Our 13-year-old son received a kidney transplant several years ago. He has a rare kidney disease with an unknown cause and no cure. Every time he would get the slightest illness, he would relapse. There was a period in his life when we did everything we could to keep him in a bubble. If he just didn't get sick, maybe we could beat this terrible disease. But he relapsed anyway. Eventually, his kidneys failed, despite us doing everything in our power to prevent it, and we learned. We learned that we are not the healer. That position belongs to God alone. It's not on our shoulders to control life and death, or even sickness and health, and there's freedom in that. We stopped trying to control what was never meant to be under our authority anyway, and started focusing on giving our son the most normal and full life we could. He went to school, he played with friends, he had sleepovers, and he lived, and he still lives. He kept living through all of this because time can't be bought, borrowed, or returned. It isn't guaranteed, nor can we will more of it into being. We can only decide what we do with the God-given gift of it right now. I'm asking you to make and keep masks optional for our kids and to refuse any routine testing or tracking of the experimental vaccine. They've endured enough and lost enough already. Let's teach them to respect different opinions and different choices without justifying our own by forcing them on others. Let's let families and their physicians decide personal medical decisions and let the school district teach academics. Let's take a stand for our kids now and in the coming weeks and months as policies will undoubtedly continue to change. And most of all, let's stop trying to control what was never meant to be under our authority anyway.
Thank you, Ms. Daggett. Our next speaker tonight is Ms. Sherry Pife. She's a resident of District 6 and here to speak on vaccines and masks.
Thank you, everybody. Fourth generation Greeley native, Greeley District 6 graduate. My son is a District 6 graduate, so I appreciate you listening to me tonight. I'm actually not even here to talk to you about the masks. I do support the effort to keep it by choice of parents. However, what I would like to talk to you about is the protocols currently in place for quarantining. This district proudly boasts its no place for hate doctrine, and I have supported that for the years that I have been here, and I will continue to support that. The policy that it has in place right now to manage COVID outbreaks goes against every grain of that sentiment. It segregates kids and teachers into two classes of vaccinated versus unvaccinated and can only lead to more problems. What do you think is going to happen when student or teacher A contracts COVID and students B, C, or D and the teacher have to go home and quarantine while the rest of the class gets to stay in school? At best, when those students or teacher come back, they are going to be treated differently. And at worst, they'll be treated in a way that speaks directly to the definition of bullying on your website. It's going to be planned and done on purpose. The target of the bullying is upset. The bully is trying to gain control over the target. The bully blames the target. The target wants to stop the bullying's behavior, but the bully does not. And the bullying won't stop with the students. It'll continue with the staff. If you need any evidence of that, you can look currently as to what is circulating on social media by members of this community who continuously talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion to the youth of our community and other civic groups. The meme calls anyone who supports medical autonomy unintelligent, uneducated, uncivilized, unable to comprehend basic common sense, and uncaring for those who are vulnerable. It is hypocritical and unacceptable from anyone, much less those who claim to be in a position of trust in this district. The meme is the epitome of bullying and about as hateful as it gets. And considering who is propagating it, it will carry weight with the youth of our community and filter into your classrooms. I won't apologize for thinking for myself, and I'd be more than happy to have anybody test any of those things I'm accused of not being. This board needs to direct the superintendent to come up with a fair and more equitable way to COVID outbreak under control. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Miss Cynthia Kinsley. I'm sorry. She's a resident of District 6, parent of a student enrolled in District 6, here to speak on mask vaccine mandates in the 21-22 school year. Thank you.
Thank you very much for allowing us to speak tonight. I am just one of many parents who believe that respect should be shown to all those and the choice should be left up to the families. As a parent, God has bestowed us this precious gift of a child, and their decisions about their health, mask, vaccine, whatever it is, should be left up to the parents until they are an adult. And all our kids that are teenagers and down, if they're not 18, the choice should still be ours. And it shouldn't be mandated by a Board of Education. It should be mandated by the parents. The Board of Education is voted in every 2 years, 3 years. I know there's 3 members that are up for vote this year, and you are voted in by us, the parents, and it's based on the work that you do, which I understand is difficult and voluntary, but it also should reflect what we as parents want for our school district. We vote for you based on what you've run on, what you've told us you stand for, and I realize that the last time that we went in and we voted for school board members, this wasn't a thing. We didn't have this big problem. However, this community is a relatively conservative community, and parents really want to make those decisions for their own children. I understand you all have different backgrounds and you have different occupations, and so you have different experiences. But I think as you're hearing tonight, that most of us, that at least that are present here, and it's only a small percentage of, I think, of the larger whole, really want to keep this a choice. If those want to go to school and they want to be vaccinated or they want to wear a mask, feel free. But I don't want that mandated on me or my children or any student or teacher in the district. A lot of my other talking points were already mentioned, but I do want to thank you very much for your hard work and thank everyone who showed up tonight to speak on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kinsley. Our next speaker is Mr. William Gallard. He's a resident of District 6, and he's here to speak on no voting on student mask mandates.
Good morning, President and the City School Board. Oh, sorry. I'm from Vietnam War. I have never seen this kind of control that you think you have as a school board. You don't have a right to tell me or my child that has to wear a mask. You don't have the facts. There's too many different experts out there to disagree with that mask works, that agree that mask works. I don't know where you think you get this power from. The superintendent doesn't have it. You people don't have it. It's not American way, and that's what I'm mad about, because you think you have the power to make my grandkids, not kid, my kids are old enough. In fact, I'm going to be a great-grandpa on Monday. And I don't think this is the American way. This is a bunch of people that think they know more than the public, our parents, and you want to ram something down our throats. And that's what I don't like, and I'll fight this to the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gallard. Our next speaker is Mr. Jamie Weaver, resident of District 6, mandatory masking and speaking on mandatory masking and vaccines. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm here to speak on behalf of the students and faculty who are too afraid to speak. They are afraid because they will be retaliated against or afraid of losing their job or status in some way. I'm here to speak out against mandatory masking for students and faculty and the potential for mandatory vaccinations. We are learning every day that masks pose lots of threats to our children. Children do not readily acquire COVID-19 and do not spread it to teachers or endanger parents at home like we originally thought. This is settled science that we can depend on after over a year of navigating this virus. Masking children poses numerous threats. I'm not going to list them all because I echo what's already been said, but the masks are known to carry such diseases, pneumonia, tuberculosis, and meningitis. The psychological issues are staggering. Children rely on facial expressions, nonverbal cues, and especially our special needs kids. One of the things I've heard a lot talking with special needs teachers and parents is that when you mask a child, and you mask the person talking to them, they lose all ability to communicate. And that's a huge deal. They suffer greatly because of that. We will not take orders from a school board or any other bureaucratic entity that is drunk on power. Parents and their medical team know what is best for their children. I don't even have a kid in District 6. She homeschools because she suffers from migraines, which are conveniently triggered by wearing a mask. We verified this by putting a pulse oximeter on her finger, and her oxygen goes down, and then she gets a migraine. So she would be missing a lot of school. The virus has a 99% survival rate, with children being the least affected. We cannot gamble our children's future over a virus that is 1/4 as deadly to children as influenza. That's what the numbers say, that's what the science says, and the board has an obligation to protect our children and do what is in their best interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Weaver. Our next speaker is Ms. Jackie Kinsley, and she is a resident of District 6, and she's here to speak on mask and vaccine mandate.
Well, thank you. I was just notified of this meeting today, so I didn't have a speech prepared, but I am part of the healthcare workers against the mandate, and I wanted to show you that these masks were never intended to protect you against a virus. These were meant for surgical procedures to prevent splash. They let viruses in, they let viruses out. You are breathing in your own bacteria and your viruses. And if you can see on my mask, the fibers that accumulate on this mask, you are breathing that into your lungs. This does not protect you against the COVID virus. This does. Now, while we're talking about it, if you're going to enforce a mandate, you're going to need an N95, not a surgical mask. You will need to place it over your nose and tie it. Now, if you don't wear glasses, you're still exposed because the virus can get into your eyes. We have to wear goggles at work, and we have to wear this. While you're at it, why don't you wear a hazmat suit, because that's the only thing that's going to protect you against the coronavirus. Get yourself immunized with healthy, naturally acquired immunity, and don't take the vaccine. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kinsley. Our next speaker is Mr. Eric Sorbo. He is a parent of a student enrolled in District 6, and here to speak on the mask mandate.
Superintendent Pilch, members of the Board of Education, thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. As a parent of children in District 6, I'm asking that you consider not mandating masks for the upcoming school year. According to CDC data, young people have a much lower incidence of severe illness with COVID-19, and there is little data to show that schools are primary transmission areas for COVID-19 between students or from students to families at home. I'm going to stay as unemotional as I can for the rest of my time, but this has become an emotional issue. I've checked several sources since I emailed you all last week and discovered that suicide rates are not up as sharply as I thought. Adolescent and teen suicidal ideation rates and ER and provider visits for mental health crises are up sharply. Social isolation was likely a significant factor in the rise. However, I've read several articles about the effect masks have on the ability for humans to read emotions and co-regulate through facial expressions. This could be the largest driving factor in adolescents and teens' feelings of disconnection and hopelessness. If we continue to mask our kids, my fear is the feelings of disconnection will drag on and ideation will lead to successful attempts. When the mask mandate was lifted earlier this year, the most common comment I received in our office was, "It's so nice to see everyone's face." It's not just kids, it's everyone who suffers when we cover our faces. I'm simply asking for the emotional health and well-being of the children of this great community that you not implement a mask mandate for the coming school year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sorbo. Our next speaker is Mr. David Meek. He is a a resident of Greeley 6, a grandparent, and here to speak on masks.
And he's not here.
Okay, not here. All right. Our next speaker is Jamie Silvermail, and this is enrolled in District 6, concerned citizen, and here to speak on any potential mask mandates for students in grades PK-12.
Hi, it's Jamie Silvernail, and thank you for your time. I know that this is going to be a long evening for you, but one of the things that I love telling my kids is in this country, we have the ability to speak about something we're passionate about, and it's important that you share your concerns or else nobody's going to know. So as a mom of 2 kids who are still in school, we ended up homeschooling last year. I was blessed to have the opportunity to work from home and do that for them, but that's not a choice everybody has. I have a child who's autistic, and last year was going to be her first year in school. When I saw the different partitions and the masking and the separation that was going to be in place recommended by the CDC before we got even into summer, I started second guessing that. My child struggles enough trying to read facial cues, body language, and see and hear. To add a mask to it, she's 12. She's not legally, because it's not a law, it's a mandate. They don't have the right to make that a law without a vote. But she has suffered so much this past year, and so it will be another year of us homeschooling her. My 16-year-old struggles with anxiety and also has some hearing difficulties. So the anxiety, when you put that mask on, she struggles to breathe, her heart rate increases, her ability to focus, pay attention, and connect with people is dropped. Her education would have been a wash last year, so we homeschooled her as well. However, what I did see with the homeschooling and the fact that she wasn't able to get connected in the community that we had just moved to is that she struggled with social interactions with other kids. A mask is a visible symbol to stay back. How are kids supposed to connect to each other and form relationships? It's also become a symbol of division. And so if you choose to mask certain people, have certain people stay home, what's going to happen is these kids are going to start segregating into groups, which I thought was something we were trying to avoid. I feel like it is important for us to look at more than just the CDC for guidance. They are not elected officials, they are appointed. You guys are elected officials. I look around this room and out of all of you I see, one person has a mask on. And that's despite the fact that the CDC guidelines changed over a week ago. So that tells me that you have opinions about it as well, but at this point you're willing to make a choice, but you're gonna tell our kids they don't have a choice. As a parent, that should be something I get to choose. I apologize, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Silvernail. Next speaker is Bobby Schilling, and Ms. Schilling is parent of a student enrolled in District 6 and here to speak on mask mandates and requirements.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you for your time tonight, board members and Superintendent Pilch. My name is Bobby Schilling. I have 2 daughters in the district. I'm a District 6 graduate as well, and I'm just here as a concerned parent. I have no MD background. I'm not a virologist, but I'll tell you, I have been doing so much research over the past year so that my kids are doing what's best for them and what's best for us as a family. And I wanted to highlight some things that I found that you might find interesting. One of the things that I thought was best was a compilation of studies that LifeSite News brought out just within the past few weeks. They were able to list 47 studies of the ineffectiveness of masks. Not 1, not 2, 47. On top of that, there were 32 more studies that they listed of the harmful effects of our children having masks on all day. In addition to that, and kind of diving into the negative effects of children wearing masks, the JAMA Network Journal of Pediatrics did a CO2 study with children for wearing masks for 3 minutes. Mind you, the school day is about 270 minutes. These children were ages 6 to 17, 20 girls, 25 boys. They were told to wear the mask for 3 minutes. When they did the pre-test without the mask, the CO2 levels were your basic 0.1 and some change parts per million. After just 3 minutes of these masks on these children, it was 0.5 to 0.6 parts per million. That's 3 times more than any health advisor or safety advisor has for any business or institute out there that has safety guidelines for adults. That's kind of putting it into perspective. These children's brains are growing, they're developing, and for us to take that oxygen from those children is just absurd. It's child abuse. And I don't think that that's anything that we should be forcing our children to do. I also want to remind you, and I think a lot of other people have up here, it's a 99.997% fatality rate for children, a 0.0003%.
Thank you, Ms. Schilling.
Infection rate for children 0 to 19. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Melissa Wheeler. Ms. Wheeler is resident of District 6, a parent of a student enrolled in District 6, and here to speak on mask mandates in schools. Ms. Wheeler, are you present?
She is not present.
Okay. Our next speaker is Candace Sawyer. Ms. Sawyer is a resident of District 6, a parent of a student enrolled in District 6, and here to speak on mask mandates and vaccines. Is Ms. Sawyer here?
I was not able to locate her either.
Okay. Our next speaker is Mr. Brandon Torres. He is a parent of a student enrolled in District 6 and a member of District 6 staff, here to speak on mask mandate.
Thank you. Our equity work last year had the grounding question, what holds kids back at Greeley West? We could say what holds kids back in Greeley and Evans. We identified teacher habits and classroom practices that were not anti-racist and equitable for all students, and then focused our teaching goals around these habits and practices. I was here last year advocating for fully in-person school because we all know online and hybrid school holds kids back. A mask mandate will hold kids back this year. For the past 16 months, our students were hurt emotionally and socially by the way we ran school. It can be seen in every piece of data you look at. One of the biggest failures was the restrictive environment that students could communicate and socialize with each other, and how teachers could communicate with their students in the classroom. Academic discourse in our classrooms took a big hit last year. And Dr. Asmus, you saw that for yourself. Mass silence students because it is very difficult to physically communicate with face coverings in the classroom. Wearing masks silenced students last year and made them feel like talking and interacting were unsafe. The solution is the vaccine, following the new and improved COVID protocols and staying home when we are sick. Wearing a mask needs to be a personal choice. We have done a good job building a culture that wearing a mask is all right and is a perfectly acceptable choice. I'll say it again. We have done a good job building a culture that when you wear a mask, it's all right, and it's a perfectly acceptable choice. A mask mandate will hold students back this year. Students desperately need a normal year now that close to 80% of teachers and staff are vaccinated, and close to 50% of all students who are eligible are also vaccinated, thanks to our grassroots efforts here in Greeley to get us vaccinated. I got more to say, but I'll respectfully finish. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Torres. Our next speaker is Jessica Reed. Ms. Reed is a parent of a student enrolled in District 6 and here to speak on the proposed mask mandate. Ms. Reed.
Hi. My writing is for the proposed mask mandate. I feel the same way about the vaccines and personal choice. My name is Jessica Reed. I have 2 children who have graduated from District 6, and I have a junior at Northridge High School. I believe in personal choice and oppose a mask mandate. District 6 mission statement reads, District 6 engages every student in a personalized, well-rounded and excellent education, preparing students to be college and career ready. And the District 6 values and beliefs read in part, we promote access, opportunity, and choice. The proposed mask mandate does not support personalized education or choice. If this was a private institution mandating masks, I, at this point, would have a choice as to whether I want my child to attend such an institution. District 6 is a public school system, and I don't believe it is within the board's purview to mandate masks. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. Our next speaker is Jace Reed, a student in District 6, speaking on the proposed mask mandate. Mr. Reed.
Thank you. Like you said, I'm Jace Reed. I am a junior at Northridge High School, and I also oppose the mask mandate. Personally, I can speak, last year wasn't the best school year. I think we can all agree. We were dealt a bad hand of cards. I think that this ability to choose whether or not we wear a mask will bring us one step closer to a quote-unquote normal year. I think we can all agree that students need some normalcy in the classroom. I can speak for myself on that behalf, to maximize a student's learning potential. Masks are just another distraction to draw students' focus away from the topic at hand. I understand the risks involved with not wearing a mask, but I would rather go back to a regular, typical school environment and risk quarantine than have to wear a mask for another year and risk my future education and ability to learn. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. The next speaker is Sonia Mill. She's a resident of District 6 and here to speak on mask, vaccine, and testing.
Hi, everyone. I want to thank you for serving on this board. I know it's voluntary work. You've got a big responsibility here. I want to talk about masks, testing, and the vaccine, and a discrimination policy. Masks suffocate humans. We know that. We can't breathe. None of us can breathe with them on. Nobody wants to wear it, especially kids, but we do rely on those facial expressions, especially from our teachers, right? We want that smile from our teachers. Please allow our children to have that this year, please. Okay, second, testing. Testing is fraudulent. Testing is the PCR test, and that's what we're using. This was created by Dr. Carrie Mullis. This test was never created, and these are his words, this was never created to be a diagnostic test. So any COVID test that comes from any COVID positive that comes from a PCR test is bull, okay? So that's what we're using to test, and we're not using a different test for the Delta variant. So that's bull as well. And also, I want to oppose, and I strongly oppose this testing for unvaccinated children. There is a chemical on this swab that causes cancer, and that's called ethylene oxide. I have the MSDSs here. You can look at them if you want, but that is important for you to know that every time this chemical goes into our kids' noses or your noses, that you are at risk. And the most dangerous way to get this chemical is by inhalation. So now you've shoved this up and you've rubbed this stuff up to your brain, and now you're inhaling it. Hello, cancer. Okay, so let's not test our kids. Well, it's not required. If somebody wants to do it, they can do it, whatever. Vaccine. This vaccine is not FDA approved. It's experimental. Our children are not lab rats. We are not lab rats. Do not mandate this vaccine. It's liability free. There is no recourse if this harms or kills anyone. Okay, it's protected by the 2005 PrEP Act. That's not really different than the liability-free vaccines, childhood vaccines, which are protected by the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act of 1986. Last thing, graphene oxide is in the Pfizer vaccine. I have an MSDS on that as well. That is also worth looking up. I have cards. I couldn't send these via email. I want every one of you and any parent that wants one to come see me and get these cards. I also have information on the COVID vaccine specifically.
Thank you, Ms. Mill.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Ms. Amber Harmon. She's a parent and student of a student enrolled in District 6 and here to speak on mask mandates. Ms. Harmon?
Unable to locate.
Okay. And our final speaker is Ms.
I'm sorry, Mr. Matthews, can I interrupt you?
Yes.
Olivia Myers was actually hit a
Oh.
dial, and she would like to speak to the mask mandate as well. She's in the room.
Okay, certainly Miss Olivia Myers. Are you in the room? There you are. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Olivia Myers. I have 3 school-aged children this year. One of them is going to be a kindergartner. And one of the big reasons that I oppose masks is when our children are learning to enunciate and speak new letters for the first time when they begin to read, they mimic what their teacher teaches. We look at each other's faces. And as kindergartners that are going in to experience all of this for the first time, they want to see their teachers' faces. They need to see their teachers' faces to learn to enunciate these letters and these sounds to speak. Last year, I chose to put my kids into school. I chose to put them in a mask and send them, my 2 older boys. And because of the constant quarantine, I also chose to pull them out and to homeschool them. That was an incredibly difficult position for my husband and I to be in, but it was what was best for our children. I am choosing to come back because of the opportunity that my children will be going unmasked. Statistically, the most dangerous thing that we do for our children every day is put them in our vehicles. And we're not changing that habit, and we're not changing that routine. And that is the most dangerous thing that we do for our children. Please consider not making a mask mandate. It is not healthy for our children. It is not healthy for their learning. And the last thing I'm going to leave you with is, I don't know what the statistics are for people attending a board meeting, but I do know the statistics of people that show up to talk to their political representatives. And it is for each person that shows up to speak their mind, there are 1,000 people that believe the way that they do. So please consider that with all of us that have come forward. Thank you.
Our final speaker tonight on agenda items is Ms. Jillian Klug, I'm sorry. She's a parent of a student or students enrolled in District 6 and here to speak on masks in school.
Hello, I'm Jillian Klug. Thank you guys for being on the board and listening to all of us all night long. I am so emotional speaker, but I am trying. My son came into District 6 last year as a kindergartner, and for him to try and learn was wonderful. I was so excited for him to start, but every day was a battle for him to put that mask on and get shuffled out and have to be in the same room 6 feet apart from his friends, but still trying to learn. He continued to have some learning difficulties with reading and with reading and his social emotional, because he obviously can't smile at his friends and can't see them. I know our school allowed a little bit more mask-free time, but the fact is that he is now a little bit less behind because he was not able to see his teacher enunciate those words as a kindergartner and learn how to sound out the words that he needs to read to be effective for the rest of his life. So I am asking you to please let me be the governor of my own children. I love him, and I love the other two that will hopefully be in District 6 as well. So please do your research, think about what the parents want, and please let it be optional for us to send our kids to school maskless. Okay? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Klug. I do believe those are all the speakers that we have tonight, Ms. Crane, desiring to speak on agenda items.
That's correct.
And so we're now to our work session report. And so Ms. Crane, will you give us our work session report, please?
Board of Education President Michael Matthews began the work session with comments and updates from board members and then proceeded to review the calendar of upcoming events. Assistant Superintendent of Support Services Kent Henson provided an update on the 2017 mill levy override and the 2019 bond issue. Assistant Superintendent of Academic Achievement Dr. Stacy Dattery provided an education recovery update. The board discussed community engagement and debriefed the work session to conclude.
Thank you, Ms. Crane. We're now to our superintendent's report. And so Dr. Pilch, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you, President Matthews. Good evening. And I want to just first start with a big shout out for our school kickoff event that was held on Saturday at Island Grove. We had several thousand people out there, students and family members to those students, lots of community partners and lots of community supporters, and most of you were able to be a part of that day as well. And so I want to just give a big shout out to all of you who volunteered and to all of our team who put that together and to all of the families and students who were able to be a part of that day. It's really fun to welcome everybody back, and I know you all had a great time out there, so congrats to everyone. You know, I don't typically comment on public comment, but I feel compelled to do so. There is a COVID update tonight on the agenda, and I will be sharing the recommendations of our emergency response team as a part of that update, but we certainly are not looking to recommend universal masking for all students and staff in our schools. And so I'm not quite sure how this got so spun up, but it seems that it did, and I'm really sorry. I think we have a lot of people who are pretty angry over something that isn't really even on the agenda tonight to consider. So I think that's really unfortunate, and I'm sad about that. I'm really sad about that. But I also appreciate people coming in and sharing their concerns, sharing their truth. It's important that we hear from the public. We all serve as public servants in this community. the board as well as my staff and I, and so I do appreciate the feedback. But I want to be clear, there is no vote on the agenda tonight to vote for masks or vaccines. And I'll talk more about that when I get to my COVID update. So, I also wanted to say staff are back. Students will be back starting on Thursday. Students have been registering at the secondary level. Our staff have been back now for 3 full days. Our new teachers started a week ago, and I've had the privilege to be in buildings and meeting with staff and welcoming staff back, and people are in really good spirits. I mean, they were tired last year. We were tired by the end of the year, and then many of them dug even deeper and came back to teach summer school and to give even more after they gave so much in the previous months as they were learning a new way of being and teaching and doing school in a pandemic. And but staff are back. They're rested. They're energized, and they're ready to meet their students when they return on Thursday of this week. So thank you very much, and I think we're ready for the rest of our agenda.
Thank you, Dr. Pilch. Our next item on the agenda is actually to approve the agenda, and we need to do this every meeting, and we need a motion to do so.
I move that the Board of Education of Greeley Evans School District 6 approves the agenda as presented.
Second.
Thank you both. Is there any discussion on the agenda? Hearing none, Ms. Crane, will you give us a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Hafley?
Aye.
Mrs. Mash?
Aye.
Mr. Matthews?
Aye.
Mrs. Mueller?
Aye.
Ms. Pappas?
Aye.
Mrs. Solis?
Aye.
Mr. Talley?
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you, Ms. Crane. Our next item is our consent agenda that I mentioned earlier, and it is also needs to have a motion.
I move that the Board of Education of Greeley Evans School District 6 approves items as presented on the consent agenda and authorizes the officers to sign any and all contracts.
Second.
Thank you both. Any discussion on the consent agenda? Hearing none, Ms. Crane.
Mr. Hafley?
Aye.
Mrs. Mash?
Aye.
Mr. Matthews?
Aye.
Mrs. Mueller?
Aye.
Ms. Pappas?
Aye.
Mrs. Solis?
Aye.
Mr. Talley?
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you, Ms. Crane. We are now to that special item that I mentioned earlier, and it's a recognition of Northridge High School for the recipient of the 2021 Samford I'm not even sure how to pronounce this, Weil Academy of Excellence Award. And so, Dr. Pilch, I will give this to you. I'm sure someone's coming to give us some more information, but I'll hand it over to you first.
Thank you. I see Assistant Superintendent Mr. Osmus making his way to the podium. This is one of those times that I miss being a high school principal and miss being Assistant Superintendent of Secondary Leadership because, at the ground level, you as a high school principal and your team here tonight, you get to really see your leadership and what a difference you're making with students when you get this kind of a recognition. So congratulations to all of you. Thank you for being here tonight, Mayor Norton. I know you've been deeply committed to the STEM program at Northridge High School, and thank you for putting on your NAF shirt and joining the team to be here tonight. And, I'm just so proud of all of you. And Ms. Rangel, I see you. I didn't recognize you at first, but I see you. I see you now. And, it makes you want to be a high school teacher again when you think about this kind of honor. I mean, this is a big deal. So congratulations. And Mr. Osmus, tell us why this is a big deal.
Well, Board of Education and Dr. Pilch for stealing all my thunder, and President Matthews. No, it really is an exciting time. We have great schools. We just have great schools in this district, and I am super proud. I've only been in this position now going on my second year, but I'm proud of all the things we have in our schools, and especially right now at Northridge, being awarded the Samford Weil Academy of Excellence Award. This was given to them after they reached the distinguished level last year on the STEM Academy, which we were here last spring, honoring them, and then now coming down to just a few finalists and them having the award. So congratulations to them. Now, and soon you can probably correct all my numbers here, but what I understand is there are 392 NAF high schools. Only 92 of these schools have reached the distinguished level in the STEM Academy, and a significantly smaller number actually get awarded this award that they received. So Dr. Olson, congratulations, and I want to turn this over to you right now just to kind of recognize your team and tell us about the journey that you have been on.
Good evening, our school board, President Matthews and Dr. Pilch. I am so honored to be able to represent Northridge High School and all the hard work of our staff and students. Our journey started about 11 years ago with, I believe, one intern and with a local business. And then my first summer, I think one of the first things I got to be a part of was the summer internship celebration with the city of Greeley, and it has just grown from there. So I just want to acknowledge the people behind me in the green shirts. I have my admin team here, Adam Cohn, Jeff Collins, and Marky Ramirez. I also have our STEM coordinator, Brenda Rangel, and Tom Norton, who is our advisory board president. They have helped us steer this ship for hundreds of our students to be able to have real world on-time grad plans and to make sure that they are moving towards their post-secondary goals in projects such as singing Tesla or a CO2 laser or things of that nature. Our students, they dream of it. We find the mentors, and then they're able to come to fruition within there. And so receiving this honor has just let us celebrate not only our students, but our staff, and we are looking forward to another decade of amazing opportunities for our students. So thank you so much for this honor. We actually, sorry, Mr. Asmus, but I do need to correct your data on record. There are 696 NAF schools, and we are one of 92 at the distinguished level, and we are now one of 2 who have earned the Sanford Weill Academy of Excellence Award. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
So, and excuse me, Dr. Olson or Ms. Rangel, I wonder if you could help the board and the public to understand a little bit more about what it entails to actually get this award and how it came to be for
My pleasure.
Northridge High School.
Of course. Part of, there's actually 4 major indicators as to why we received this award. One of them is because of our advisory board. We have an ongoing extensive advisory board that not only tells us how to, not tells us, supports us in how we choose to select courses and offerings for our students and making sure that we are connected to what is actually happening out in the real world. So the advisory board is one. Another one is that we have completed pretty close to 100% paid internships and successful ones over the last 8 or 9 years of our program. Our students are also required to invite guest speakers in, participate in job shadowing out in the community, and then participate in a paid internship the summer of their junior year. So we are so ever grateful for our Greeley Evans community for continuing to sponsor our students and pay them while they are learning how to on-the-job training, literally. And some of our students are now full-time employees of the city of Greeley who never thought that they would move past some of the jobs that they maintained in high school. It also gives our staff an opportunity to make sure that they're staying connected to the current most industry level certificates and expectations, as we want to ensure that all of our students, no matter what their college or career goals are, that what they do in Northridge will just amplify how they accomplish their goals in their future. And so our National Academy Foundation is a great steering guide in not only to hold us accountable at a very high level, but also to ensure that the students that are in our academy are a direct representation of our entire population. And so we have worked very hard to make sure that we meet those expectations, and now for 2 years in a row, we have exceeded those expectations by staying at the distinguished level for the National Academy Foundation. So it is a pretty amazing overseer of educational opportunities, and the whole reason they came aboard many years ago was that they recognized that students were not learning some of the skill sets that they needed and employers wanted out in their job force. And the National Academy Foundation allows our students to gain skill sets in resume building, to be able to do mock interviews, and then get placed into their internship based on those mock interviews. And so we are super proud of our continuum of career and college readiness, and we will continue to do so as we move forward with our students this year.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
Thank you. We do like each other.
Thank you.
Can I just say one quick word as past mayor, and having this come up at a time when I was mayor and I could utilize that to bring something forward for this community and for the schools of this community was really an honor for me. And it kind of brings me full circle from when I was in high school and I did a project of building a solar home, which was a lot more years before they thought solar was going to work. Makes it really nice to see these young people doing a project, building a project, making something happen that they can get their hands on. So thank you for supporting this program and helping these young people get their dreams out in front of them, and something I can really grasp hold of. So thank you for supporting it.
Thank you, Mayor Norton. Thank you, Ms. Olson, Dr. Olson. Sorry. Congratulations on that as well. And thank you and congratulations to Northridge. Such a wonderful achievement. We could not be more proud of this high school and this program. So thank you for being here tonight. Our next item is a resolution addressing remote learning during the 2021-2022 school year. This one is an action item that will need a motion.
I move that the Board of Education of Greeley Evans School District 6 approves the resolution addressing remote learning during the 2021-2022 school year as presented.
Second.
Thank you both. Before we go any further in discussing the resolution, Mr. Talley, would you be so kind as to read this resolution?
Of course. Resolution of the Board of Education of Weld County School District 6. Resolution addressing remote learning during the 2021-2022 school year. Whereas on March 11th, 2020, the World Health Organization, WHO, characterized COVID-19 as a pandemic, meaning the WHO identified the worldwide spread of a new disease. And whereas on March 10, 2020, Governor Jared Polis declared a state of emergency and issued Executive Order D 2020-003 on March 11, 2020 as a safeguard against the further spread of COVID-19. And whereas on June 11, 2021, Governor Jared Polis amended and extended Executive Order D 2020-003 through Executive Order D 2021-114. And whereas under Colorado Constitution, Article 9:15, the local Board of Education has control of instruction in its public schools. And whereas, as required by 1 CCR 301-39, the Board of Education defines educational process in Board Policy IC-I/ICA, school year, school calendar, instruction time. And whereas the Board of Education finds that ongoing COVID-19 health concerns create the need for changes to instructional delivery and the situations under which students are considered in attendance. And whereas the Colorado Department of Education provided guidance specific for the 2021-2022 school year, stating that local boards that wish to utilize a remote learning option must include remote learning as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and its definition of actively engaging in the educational process, described acceptable ways in which synchronous and asynchronous teacher-pupil instruction in contact time may occur during remote learning, and acceptable ways in which attendance participation should be documented during remote learning. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education of Greeley Evans School District 6 authorizes the following for the 2021-2022 school year. Expansion of the definition of actively engaged in the educational process addressed in Board Policy IC/ICA, school year, school calendar, instruction time to include remote learning as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic for students provided under the supervision of a certified or licensed teacher. Defining supervision of a certified or licensed teacher as meaning a certified or licensed educator, including teachers, counselors, paraprofessionals, or other certified or licensed staff as assigned. 3, attendance will be recorded at least once daily for days when instructional hours are provided, meaning a student is actively engaged in the educational process. 4, student contact days may include remote learning days implemented as a result of public health and safety measures. Teacher-pupil instruction and contact time may occur in the following ways. A, presence during in-person instruction. B, presence during virtual instruction via video conferencing or recorded lessons. C, assignments completed at home. D, logging into the online learning platform. E, logging into digital content applications. F, signing an online form attesting to work completion at home. G, student demonstration of learning. H, responding to teacher emails or communication. Or I, other means as determined by the school and/or teacher. Now therefore, be it further resolved that the district will ensure that all students who are participating in remote learning will receive equitable instruction and services. Further, the district will ensure that within the constraints of COVID-19, equitable and appropriate instruction will continue to be offered to those students requiring accommodations. Now be it further resolved that the superintendent is directed to keep the Board of Education informed of actions taken under this resolution. Now be it further resolved that this resolution is in effect for the duration of the 2021-2022 school year unless otherwise rescinded or extended by the board upon a 2/3 majority vote. Now be it further resolved that execution of this resolution is conclusive evidence of the board's approval of this action and the authority granted herein. Adopted and approved this 9th day of August, 2021. Weld County School District 6. Michael Matthews, Board President.
Thank you, Mr. Talley. Dr. Pilch, before we open this up for questions and comments, is there anything you would like to tell us about this?
Just for point of clarification, Mr. Matthews, this resolution is required because of the COVID pandemic. In the event that we should have to go fully remote again, we have to have this resolution in place to take appropriate action to do so. I questioned it initially with my staff because we have the online academy now, so I wondered why we had to do this in addition to the online academy, but it's part of the pandemic and it's part of the requirements that we have here in the state of Colorado for every district to say, yes, I'm ready, should we have to go fully remote at some point because of this pandemic.
All right, thank you, Dr. Pilch. Pretty straightforward, but any questions, comments from board members? Seeing none, Ms. Crane, will you give us a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Haefele?
Aye.
Mrs. Mash?
Aye.
Mr. Matthews?
Aye.
Mrs. Mueller? Aye. Ms. Pappas?
Aye.
Mrs. Solis?
Aye.
Mr. Talley?
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you, Ms. Crane. Our next item or a series of board policies, and if you follow school board meetings regularly, I'm sure you all do, this is something we routinely do. It ends up being a lot of changing shalls to must or will or may, and bringing our policies up to date with the latest legislative session. So we're going to try to go through these rather quickly tonight, but they all are action items. They all require motions. And our first one is revisions to policy BG, school board policy process.
I move that the Board of Education of Greeley Evans School District 6 approves revisions to policy BG, school board policy process as presented.
Second.
Thank you both. Any discussion or questions on this one? Seeing none, Ms. Crane.
Mr. Haefele?
Aye.
Mrs. Mash?
Aye.
Mr. Matthews?
Aye.
Mrs. Mueller?
Aye.
Ms. Pappas?
Aye.
Mrs. Solis?
Aye.
Mr. Talley?
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you, Ms. Crane. Our next item is revisions to policy CBB, recruitment of superintendent, and this is also an action item.
I move that the Board of Education of Greeley Evans School District 6 approves revisions to policy CBB, recruitment of superintendent as presented.
Second.
Thank you both. Any discussion on this one? Hearing none, Ms. Crane, will you give us a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Haefele?
Aye.
Mrs. Mash?
Aye.
Mr. Matthews?
Aye.
Mrs. Mueller?
Aye.
Ms. Pappas?
Aye.
Mrs. Solis?
Aye.
Mr. Talley?
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you, Ms. Crane. Our next one is revisions to policy GDBC, classified staff supplementary pay and overtime. This is an action item.
I move that the Board of Education of Greeley Evans School District 6 approves revisions to policy GDBC, classified staff supplementary pay overtime as presented.
Second.
Thank you all. Any discussion on this one? Hearing none, Ms. Crane.
Mr. Haefele?
Aye.
Mrs. Mash?
Aye.
Mr. Matthews?
Aye.
Mrs. Mueller?
Aye.
Ms. Pappas?
Aye.
Mrs. Solis?
Aye.
Mr. Talley?
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0.
Next item is revisions to policy IHCDA, concurrent enrollment.
I move that the Board of Education of Greeley Evans School District 6 approves revisions to policy IHCDA, concurrent enrollment as presented.
Second.
Thank you both. Any discussion on these revisions? Hearing none, Ms. Crane.
Mr. Haefele?
Aye.
Mrs. Mash?
Aye.
Mr. Matthews?
Aye.
Mrs. Mueller?
Aye.
Ms. Pappas?
Aye.
Mrs. Solis?
Aye.
Mr. Talley?
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you, Ms. Crane. Our final revisions are revisions to J, student policies.
I move that the Board of Education of Greeley Evans School District 6 approves revisions to policy BG, school board policy process as presented.
My apologies, that should state J, students policies.
Sorry.
Would you like to revise your motion?
Yes, I will revise my motion. I move that the Board of Education of Greeley Evans School District 6 approves revisions to policy J, student policies as presented.
Second.
Thank you both. Thank you, Ms. Mueller. Is there any discussion on this series of policy changes? Hearing none. Ms. Crane, will you give us a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Haefele?
Aye.
Mrs. Mash?
Aye.
Mr. Matthews?
Aye.
Mrs. Mueller?
Aye.
Ms. Pappas?
Aye.
Mrs. Solis?
Aye.
Mr. Talley?
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you, Ms. Crane. Our next item is our COVID update. And so, Dr. Pilch, I will hand this portion of the meeting to you.
Thank you, President Matthews, and Ms. Myers is bringing up the slides that we have to share tonight. I'll just preface with a few comments. As we've done for the last 16 months, I've worked with our emergency response team to compile our plan for the next step, whatever that might be, and this next step is having schools open on Thursday, of course. So we want to share with you that plan, the recommendations that we're making at this time. As has been the practice in the past, you all have served advisory to me on this. I've shared your input and advice and your feedback with the emergency response team. I fully understand that we don't have, that each board member does not have full support of some of the recommendations in this plan and some of the plan that we've put together, but our emergency response team has developed what we believe is most appropriate based on the feedback of most of the Board of Education members, as well as feedback from our staff, our administrators, and our community. So with that, I'll get started and share with you where we are. Once I've concluded, I'd like to open it up for you all to ask clarifying questions that you might have, and if there's pieces I maybe haven't included that you're wondering about if we're going to go forward with, that you would ask those at that time. And then I think that each of you would enjoy a time to just comment on this and to share your remarks. So thank you, Ms. Myers. So as I indicated at the beginning about the emergency response team, you all remember that we began our work over a year ago, meeting almost every single day to put plans in place for our students to be in person, to have an online school option for families who weren't comfortable being in person, and to make the decision of do we open or not, and how do we open? Do we open fully in person? Do we open in a hybrid schedule? But the emergency response team has continued to advise me and work alongside me as we've made those decisions and those recommendations. We are responding to the guidance that we are provided, and that guidance comes from CDC, CDPHE, as well as other local health officials. We also continue to really look at the local data on COVID, and now we're looking at data on vaccinations. That's a new piece of data we have this school year that we didn't have a year ago. And then, you know, our job is just to plan and prepare for any changes that might come in the data and that might come in our community. So I do continue to meet weekly with the Weld County Department of Public Health and Environment health officials, along with other Weld County superintendents. I continue to consult with the Northern Colorado Health Alliance Chief Executive, Dr. Mark Wallace, who is the former head of the health department for Weld County Public Health, and then continue to seek insight and advice from the health professionals in our community. And I've really appreciated those relationships and their honesty and their understanding of our community, as well as their understanding of COVID in this community, and we continue to seek their advice. So I want to talk a little bit about the protocols that are remaining in place for the school year and that are still happening. So we're disinfecting and cleaning, so the spraying down of surfaces, spraying down of classrooms, spraying down of common spaces, that continues. We're continuing to focus on good hygiene and hand washing. The air purification machines, like the one you see here, have all been, had the filters now replaced for the start of the school year. We've been able to upgrade many of our HVAC systems in the district. As you heard in the bond update earlier, that's been ongoing work. And in our HVAC systems that have allowed us to go to the higher level of filter, we have indeed done that. We will continue keeping track of cohorts at the elementary. However, we are going to allow those cohorts to intermingle more than they did in the past, while we're keeping track of who's interacting with who. We're also still recommending physical distancing when possible, so that 3 feet of distance whenever possible in our school settings and in our classrooms. Just a little bit about what it will look like compared to last year. Secondary students will have a full range of classes, and by that, I want to just remind you that at middle school and high school last year, our students really only had up to 4 classes, and they had those same 4 classes every day. And they weren't able to access a lot of their electives, and they weren't able to see a lot of their classmates and friends because they were with the same cohort of students for those 4 classes all day long every day. So we've opened the secondary schedules up to 6, 7, and 8 period days, and we will have seating charts, and we'll keep track of who is in close contact of whom, but those schedules have opened up. We also plan to open up recess, and by that we mean, you know, we had kids in quads, kind of in squads at elementary for recess, and what we've learned is the risks outdoors are just not nearly, we don't have to have as much caution as we did a year ago at this time when there was so much unknown. But for recess outdoors, that's opened up. We're still going to enforce good hand washing and hand sanitizing prior to and after recess. We're also opening up our cafeterias, and principals are working to lower the load in those cafeterias. Some of our elementary schools especially are still planning to do lunch in the classroom and aren't planning to access the cafeteria, but they are allowed to do so if they choose to do that. We are allowing students to perform and practice together in the fine arts. And you may remember last year that at middle school and high school, our performing arts groups could only have 10 students at maximum, I believe it was, at a time performing together. And we were asking that they be 6 feet apart as they were performing together. So we are allowing the students to come together in a total ensemble and be able to perform. So we'll actually be able to hear an orchestra play this year and a band play this year. And, you know, just say here that, you know, we talk a lot about the learning that students have missed out on, and there's learning that comes with athletics and activities too, for students who get the opportunity to be in a concert or to be a part of a performance. And so we know there's some places we need to do some catch up around those performing arts. Classroom volunteers at this time, we're going to hold off. And we plan to reevaluate that by the end of September, but right now we want to get school open, get staff and students back in school under these new protocols, and just hold off on people who are going to be in the classroom for half a day or all day, whom we don't know about their health status, and we certainly don't want them to be the cause of a quarantine or an infection in one of our schools. So the topic that was the topic of much public presentation tonight, as you all know, the CDPHE has recommended that all individuals in a school wear masks. Where we have landed is that masks will strongly be recommended for all individuals who are not fully vaccinated. To be frank, we do not intend to enforce that at this time or to monitor that at this time. We do as a team believe that it should be personal choice around the decision to wear a mask based on your own decision around your vaccination status. However, masks will be required for all staff and students on school buses. This is a federal law. And we were informed as superintendents here, 2 weeks, 10 days ago, that those of us who had lifted the mask requirements on school buses were actually in violation of federal guideline. So I met with bus drivers, Mr. Hinson and I did last week, and we shared with them that we would be putting masks back on school buses. And so that'll mean the bus to and from school, as well as any field trips or athletic or activity events. Anyone on that school bus will have to wear a mask. School buses fall under federal transportation laws, just like a public bus or a train or a plane. So for now, we have to enforce that. We are also recommending that masks be required at the secondary level during high-risk indoor activities. So those activities would be physical education, singing in a choir, in the band or the orchestra if you're using a brass or a winds instrument in the room. Those are activities that are still seen to be very high risk, and the possibility for virus transmission is very great in those settings when it is indoors. And this is really an area where some of the health officials have said, okay, I get that you need to get school started and you're not in a place to require masks for everyone. But what about those indoor high-risk activities when we know that kids are going to be engaging in activity that could cause potential for a lot of virus spread? So we're hoping we'll get outdoors as much as we can here in the fall, even with choir and with band and orchestra, and certainly with physical education. We also are going to ask visitors to the schools to wear masks, and this would include parents. But we know our parents want to get back in our schools and want to walk in and meet the classroom teacher. And we would ask that parents put on a mask to come into our schools. Now, the exception to that is this week with open houses, because we're doing open houses right now on back to school nights, and we have not shared this with parents yet. So we will have masks available at the front door. We'll have staff at the door saying, please wear a mask. Here's a mask. Please wear a mask as folks come in. But we understand that parents have not had that notice prior to hearing it tonight if they happen to hear it. And then quarantine. So, we're going to strive to work as hard as we can to quarantine as few of staff and students as possible. And we're going to continue to focus on health and safety. We're going to utilize that targeted quarantining. So we're talking about only the very closest contacts with exposure would be vaccinated. And so this should cut down on quarantines significantly.
Would be vaccinated or would be quarantined?
I'm sorry, did I say vaccinated? I apologize. Would be quarantined. Let me get to vaccinations next. So let me restate that. Only those individuals in the closest contact for longer periods of time with an exposure would be quarantined if they are unvaccinated. So fully vaccinated individuals will not be required to quarantine. If they become sick with COVID, of course, they would be required to isolate by order of the health department. But we will not be quarantining any of our staff and students who are fully vaccinated, even with a known long-term exposure. Unvaccinated individuals who fully wear a mask will not be required to quarantine. Staff and students who have had an exposure, a close exposure, if they have to quarantine, they will be able to return on day 8 if they haven't had any symptoms and if they have a negative test for COVID on day 5, 6, or 7. So this should bring students and staff back much more quickly should we have to enact quarantines. Most outdoor exposures will not require a quarantine, and I say most because there are some cases where the health department would tell us we still needed to quarantine. So for example, if you have a couple of folks outside for 30 minutes, very close together, shoulder to shoulder, knee to knee, and they are eating, and they're eating during that time and the masks are off, in that case, if one of them had COVID, it's very likely the health department would direct us to quarantine the other individual as well. But those should be very rare cases that we would have to quarantine for exposures outdoors. And you all know last year we quarantined for exposures during football practice and games outdoors. For if kids were together at recess, we quarantined. Under the new guidance, it is not necessary for us to do that outdoors. So let's talk a little bit about testing and what's available. We will continue to have testing at our school sites. We do still at most of our sites, well, all of our sites, we have some, if not plentiful, supply of the Binax Now tests, should staff want those. We can also give them out to families if families want them and want to self-administer those tests. That's a personal decision. We will have the ability to test should a family want their child tested at the school site for if they're found to be at school with symptoms. We will have testing again here at the district site that families and staff and students may come and be tested here as well. The state is also offering what is called opt-in serial testing. And clear last spring, we submitted for every one of our schools to have folks come in from the state if there should be families who want to opt their child into regular testing, or if there are staff members who want to opt in to regular testing. And by that, we're talking about serial testing being testing every week. The advantage, according to the health department just today, they shared, and we've heard this in the past as well, that if you do opt into serial testing and you had a negative test the last 2 weeks that you tested, and then you have an exposure, you don't have to be quarantined at that point. You wait for your next test. If your next test is negative also, and you continue to have a negative test, you do not have to quarantine. So that's how, we won't have that available till sometime in September from the state. So there'll be more information coming about that once we have confirmation from the state. Lots of PPE is still readily available through the district. There's a system that every school can request that. So if they want more masks, they want more hand sanitizer, more of the spray sanitizer, we still have that available. We do not plan to take temperatures of students prior to coming into the school. We ask that families do symptom checks before they leave to come to school, and that sick children and children with a fever would stay home from school. But taking the temperature of every child every single day did not yield very many children who had a fever, certainly for the amount of human power that went into that temperature checking. For staff, we won't be asking them to record online any longer that they've done a symptom check, but we are asking them to self-symptom check every morning and either take their temperature at home or take their temperature upon entry in the building, where we'll still have the kiosks available for staff and students who want to use the kiosks to take their temperature on the way in. Some information on vaccines, and I do want to tell you this data changes every single day, and depending on if the data is coming from the state or Weld County, it also can vary a little bit. But we were told just today that in Weld County, 53% of individuals who are eligible are fully vaccinated. And in the Greeley and Evans zip codes, 54.5% of 16-plus-year-olds are fully vaccinated, and that 52.5% of 12-plus-year-olds are fully vaccinated in our zip codes. In Weld County, 57.8% of those who are 12 and older have at least one vaccine, And this was interesting news they shared with us today from the health department that from July 4th to July 25th, Weld County saw an increase of 66% in people getting their first vaccine. So something happened in July here where, you know, a significant number of folks decided to go and get that first vaccine. The reason that's important, Teresa, if you can just go back, these numbers are important to us because it helps us to look at what's the sense of, what's the sense of confidence we can have in the numbers of folks who might be vaccinated in our community. And not only because of, and I'll talk about kids in our school here in just a minute, but not only because of the children in our school, but our children are out in the community. Our staff are out in the community. So the higher vaccination rate we have in the community, I think the higher confidence we can have that's not as likely to come into the school. So we still have information coming in from our staff regarding vaccines. Right now, over 1,500 of our staff are fully vaccinated with full vaccines. 71% of staff report being fully vaccinated. We do not all of our schools have yet responded. So what we've been asking schools to ask their staff if they're vaccinated. I will never see that list of who is and who is not vaccinated. The principal at the building collects it. It goes to our chief financial officer to compile so that we know the percent. And that's what's important because once, what we were told last year, and I know it's a moving target, was that once we get to 70%, we can begin to feel some confidence in the level of vaccination we have in our system. And so we do have a pretty high number of our staff who are fully vaccinated. We do know that 42% of actual District 6 students have at least one vaccine. So we're not collecting this information. The state actually has this information as a part of the state vaccination system, and then they share that information back to school districts, just as they would share any other vaccines that children receive. So that information is held very, very confidential in terms of just only health services staff have access to that information. But we know that in District 6, and this is our students who are eligible, 42% of them have at least one vaccine, and 30 to 32% of our students who are eligible are fully vaccinated already. I want to be clear, we are not requiring the COVID-19 vaccine for students or staff, nor am I recommending that we require it. The vaccine still does not have FDA approval. It's still approved under emergency status. And just to clarify, there is no vaccine that staff must have in order to teach here. And I know there is some disagreement around this. I know there's folks who believe that we should require the vaccine for every staff member. And we're watching other school districts in the metropolitan area do that. I think they have different circumstances than we do. Many of those districts did not open in the fall like we did. And so part of getting school open and staying open is having folks required to get the vaccine. Our teachers are not refusing to come to work or fighting us about coming to work. Our teachers are here. I can assure you of that, and they're glad to be back. I think in terms of requiring a vaccine for students, I think we are a very, very long way away from that, if not, never. I think that would require this to become one of the vaccines that is federally required to access education, like the MMR and pertussis. So then the next piece I want to share is just kind of what we're continuing to do with communication. I've been going out and meeting with each school staff and department and sharing information and answering questions and gathering their feedback. One of the things that I'm really emphasizing and other district leaders have been too is that this needs to be a safe place for people to make personal decisions around the mask and around vaccines and around attendance. If choosing online or choosing in person. This needs to be a safe place for people to do that, whether it's a student, a parent, or a staff member. And so, we are having very direct conversations with people to make sure that there is no mask shaming or vaccine shaming that is going on in our school communities. We do still have the system in place to report COVID concerns anonymously so that we can address concerns that might be coming up around COVID or around violations to COVID protocols. We will reinstate our weekly updates in our district-wide newsletter, the Intercom. Once we get started back up here, we will share information with staff on a regular basis. And then, of course, with sharing with families, we'll continue to do translation, we'll continue to text and do those phone calls to families because we know that it's a lot of information for a lot of families who English is not their first language. And then our next steps and the work ahead of us is really to get all of our students in school. So whether that is online learning or whether that's brick and mortar, we've got to get our students back in school. And you heard the plans earlier for the education recovery dollars, and those plans relate directly to getting students in school and to learning. We do have, I think, around 450 or so students in online learning, K-12. Last year we had over 4,000 at our highest points. That gives you an idea kind of on what's happening with those online learning numbers.
Could you say that number again real quick?
I think it's 450-ish, just over 400, between 400 and 500.
It's over 500.
Oh, it's now over 5? Oh, it's grown. Well, and we were taking in kids from other districts too. So Dr. Dattery is helping me out here. We're just now over 550. So they've been working hard to enroll kids, it sounds like. And as we said earlier this evening, we are supporting some of our smaller districts around us by they are, letting their families know who want online, if they don't have an online program, that they can come and enroll in District 6 and become a District 6 student and attend school online with us. We'll continue to monitor the cases and the quarantines in the schools. I've been sharing with staff that, if it looks like we have a serious spread within a school, we are ready to respond to that. And if that means we do have to put masks on everyone, we would take that action if that's necessary. But we are ready to respond. We're going to continue to support the vaccine initiatives. And I think, especially in light of hearing that there was this significant increase in vaccines in the last month, I think there may be some opportunity for us to continue to share opportunities for getting the vaccine with families and staff who might still be interested in doing that. And then, as we shared with you in our work session, we've got to continue to work to implement our plans and our promises that we're making around the education recovery dollars and the work that we have to do for families and students and staff there. And then just finally continuing to support our students and our staff as they come back and as we navigate this complex time that we're providing the supports needed for both students and staff and families. So that is my update. I'm happy to take questions now for clarification if you have questions.
Are there any questions for Dr. Pilch? Ms. Solis.
So when you quarantine people, if you don't know what their vaccination status is, how do you know who you quarantine?
We're going to ask them. So it's at that point we will be asking them, and we absolutely can. It's legal for us to do so. Are you vaccinated or not? If they say I don't want to share that, then they're going to have to quarantine. If they say yes, I'm vaccinated, then we're going to follow up for verification of the vaccination, and then they won't have to quarantine.
Okay. And then the required at secondary during high-risk indoor activities, how are you going to require that? How are you going to enforce that?
Just like we did last year. As I was out with teaching staffs the last few days, and I've shared that with them, they're prepared to do that. We will, the one thing that'll be different, is, for example, is PE teachers will need a box of masks in their classroom because those kids will have probably not been, all of them, will not have been in a mask in their other classes, and so they'll need to have masks available, and we will make sure that they do to provide those to the students in their classroom.
So what happens to that student that says, I want to make a personal choice and I choose not to wear a mask?
Well, we'll have to work through that just like we did last year with students who might have refused, and we'll work through that.
We had a blanket.
Yeah, no,
for
it's
everybody.
a requirement, and if you're going to be in the activity, you're going to have to wear a mask. And this is really, this is kind of where the health officials are kind of drawing the line on their recommendation for us, is that there's a certain amount of risk that we can tolerate, and you heard parents tonight talk about, let me take on that risk. And there's a certain amount of that we can tolerate, but in those high risk activities, we need to start out with the mask in place, and that's going to be the expectation.
Okay, I see a concern with that. And then what about visitors that refuse to wear a mask?
Same thing.
That's all my questions.
Ms. Pappas?
So I don't think you said this. If you did, I'm sorry. Last year, you were pretty, there was significant effort into making sure that there were limited adult touches with kids during the day, depending on the level. Is there anything like that this year at any level?
We are opening that back up within the school setting, but just keeping track of who is with whom. Where we are limiting that is with having those volunteers in the classroom or guest speakers in the classroom. We're just going to hold off on that. But we are allowing student teachers in, we're allowing practicum students in, and we are allowing co-teaching. So, last year we had really moved away from co-teaching in a lot of situations, which is really not good for kids. And we will be allowing that this year, and just keeping track of who's in close contact with who.
Thank you.
Ms. Mesh?
Is there any plans for field trips?
Yes, field trips are allowed. We'll follow the same guidelines. If they're on the school bus, they've got to wear masks on the bus, and then the destination they go to, if they have requirements for masks, we'd follow those. But yes, we are allowing field trips.
Ms. Mueller?
I have two questions. One involves those high-risk activities, and as a former clarinet player, I just can't help but ask, is the mask for bell or is the mask for mouth? Because some instruments you can't play without touching your reed.
Right, so the mask, there is a mask with a slit in it, so if you're a clarinet player there, and then the bell is masked as well.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. And then I just lost the second question. It'll come back to me later.
Mr. Talley?
Has there been any word from CHASA on what they're doing with that athletics?
CHASA is not providing us with any guidance.
Okay, so we'll continue sports as...
Yeah, and what we're still working on athletics, Mr. Talley, and the requirements around athletics. It looks like indoors, we will likely ask students and staff when they're working out with students to mask during practice. However, for competition, our students will be competing with other districts, and so we'll navigate that just like we did last year, which is, what do you require? What do we require? And my guess is the league will come together and they'll make some decisions as a league on what those requirements are around masking and competitions.
If we don't, if they're, will fans be required to wear masks indoor?
Not at this time.
Okay.
Are there any other questions, Dr. Pilch? Well, at this time, we'll let board members make comments, and we will start with Ms. Mash.
Well, thank you, Dr. Pilch, for preparing that update. I felt it was very comprehensive, and thank you for answering our questions. Thank you to the emergency response team who's been tirelessly talking through all of this with the staff. Thank you to every person who came and spoke and shared your story and your truth and what has happened for your child this last year. And thank you to all of those who wrote us emails over the last couple of weeks. There wasn't anyone who spoke in favor of mandatory masking, but we did hear from those people as well. I appreciated one of the parents who said this is a very complicated topic. We all have our opinions. We all think we're right. We have heard from just a very broad range of, passionate stories, also very well thought out arguments, also lots of data and articles. And I appreciate that everyone is being very thoughtful about this. So with all of that said, these are my prepared remarks, just of where I'm coming from in supporting these protocols. So this is an ever-changing and evolving situation as it was last school year. The community data, the cases of infection within our schools and our district as a whole will be constantly monitored. We'll remain in compliance with our local and state orders, and we'll continue to consult with our local healthcare systems and doctors. So with all of that said, at this point in time, this week, I feel that it is safe to bring our students back to school in person with the current protocols that Dr. Pilch has laid forward, allowing for the parents and guardians of our students to choose masking and/or vaccinations for their children. I have 10 reasons why I feel that I'm comfortable. We do currently have a low community positivity rate. We're in that 5% range. I've seen it go up as high as 5.98. It's been 5.25. Anyway, it's low-ish. We do have rising vaccination rates, and thank you to our grassroots organizations who have worked tirelessly to talk to people about the vaccine, to bring events to schools. I work at Sunrise, and I just have been really proud to say that I work at the #1 vaccinator in Weld County and the #3 in the state. We've removed many barriers to getting a vaccine. We do have a high staff vaccination rate, which is encouraging to me, in that 70% range. Children do get sick from COVID, but there is a low risk of severe illness for children. Our district staff, I understand, has met with all of our medically fragile students and their families to create a safe learning environment that is conducive for that child and that family. I agree with masks in places of high-risk activities. Though the Delta variant is on the rise, is more infectious, we are still seeing a very low rate of breakthrough cases for the vaccinated population, around 0.25% chance that you will have a breakthrough COVID case. So that also gives me lots of confidence in this vaccine. We have robust testing supplies available, our sanitation procedures, and then the number 10 reason that I feel comfortable with this plan is that I trust Dr. Pilch and her leadership and her team. She and her team have proved their ability to be leaders in education in the state last year, and I have every faith that they will continue to be guided by data and the recommendations received from the various entities in order to provide a safe learning environment for our students and staff. I also want to be very clear, as a nurse, I know from the scientific literature and the data that the vaccine against the coronavirus is safe and effective at preventing COVID-19 and at lessening the risk of severe illness. That is our way out of this pandemic. We're going to see another variant. We're going to see another variant. We need to be vaccinated so that we can end this. It is free. It is widely available for people 12 years in age and older, and no identification is required. Please talk to your healthcare professional, that person who cared for you when you were pregnant with your student, with your child, who you took to see them every month, every couple of months as they have grown. That's your trusted source of information. That's the best place where you can make an informed decision about whether the vaccine is safe for you and your children. Secondly, we know that masking does work to slow the spread of viruses. We saw virtually no influenza this year. So it is effective against the flu. And so if your child was able to have a successful year wearing a mask, as I have heard from many children, oh, my kid didn't care. My kid wanted to be at school, they'll wear a mask. Please put a mask on that child. It protects them and it helps protect the student they sit next to. However, as we've heard from many parents about the disruption that masking has caused to their students' ability to learn, interact, make friends, feel comfortable at school, if that's the case, we trust the families of those students to make the best decision for their student to be successful at school. I'm almost done. So our District 6 mission is to engage every student in a personalized, well-rounded, and excellent education, preparing students to be college and career ready. While doing this, we are caring for the whole child. We're caring for their safety, for their health, their nutrition, their social, and their emotional health. We partner with many entities who are experts in their fields. Our Greeley and Evans Police Department for safety, North Range Behavioral Health for mental health. We have dietitians, we have student wellness partners that help with our nutrition and physical education. And we have CDE, the Colorado Department of Education, who sets those high standards for curriculum. And then we rely on our local and state healthcare systems and departments for our students' health. The 7 of us and Dr. Pilch and her team, her cabinet, our school administrators, we cannot maintain expertise in all of these areas while providing a robust education. And therefore, we must rely on the guidance and recommendations of these community partners. So thank you for listening to my whole spiel, but this is where I have come from in supporting what Dr. Pilch and her team have put forward.
Mr. Talley.
Good evening, board, Dr. Pilch, your staff, community, those of you who spoke here tonight, and those of you who are watching at home. I have heard from many of you who have concerns about how we best protect our community against COVID-19, and I know that there are many tools in our toolkits for how we can best battle this virus. It needs to be done together as one community, and I really want to commend Dr. Pilch and her staff and all the school employees that are putting practices in place to safely bring our students back to school. As a parent, I am grateful to be in a school district that was able to offer in-person learning for a majority of the school year last year. I'm grateful that we are going to do that again this fall, and I am hopeful that this year we can dedicate extra focus to helping our students get back on track in their academic and their social journeys. I appreciate so much of the feedback I have received from our community members in this district around these COVID safety protocols. As somebody who works in K-12 education in another district, I am proud of the work that we as a state are doing to help students access their education, and personally, I see every day how COVID has impacted our K-12 educational system. I know that we all have different perspectives, and the stories many of you have shared with me have weighed heavily over me on these last few weeks. We started this horrendous journey over a year ago. We met in this very room and we discussed the what ifs of COVID-19. We talked about how we would respond if the numbers grew. We discussed how we would make online school work if we could no longer be in the buildings. However, through all of this, the one thing that we constantly said over and over again is that we trust our district leadership. Dr. Pilch and her cabinet have made every decision based on collaboration and guidance from our health officials, multiple levels of government, our school staff, our students, and our community. At the end of the day, we trusted her. We trusted her team. We trusted their decisions. We will be vigilant, attentive, educated, and open to conversations. When need be, we will pivot and adjust our plans and protocols. I want to say how grateful I am to be a part of this community. We have received countless emails, calls, texts, and conversations with strong community advocates. The passionate advocacy has made this decision not an easy one. We all care for our students, our staff, and our community. Safety is of the utmost importance for me, and I am confident saying the same for my colleagues up here tonight. We were approached by many parents and community members around one issue: masks. Some want a mandate and some want choice. I want to let you know that I hear you. I have read and listened to each and every one of your voices, and I can assure you that I weighed your opinions, your facts, and your justifications heavily. I met with many teachers, students, and parents. Let me tell you where I'm at. First off, I believe in masks. I believe that they are one of the many tools that can be utilized for protection against COVID-19. Our young students are not vaccinated and they do not have the opportunity yet due to their ages. Masks can help them stay safe. However, here are some of the things we'll be doing as a district to keep our students and staff and community safe. Temperature taking kiosks will be available at the entrance of every school. We will continue contact tracing and targeted quarantine as needed. We will have an emphasis on also quarantining the least amount of individuals as possible. Any staff or student with COVID-19 symptoms will be asked not to come to school. We will still be providing an online option for families who wish to pursue that route. District 6 will continue to offer COVID-19 testing for all students and staff. Weekly tests will be available for families who want their unvaccinated child tested. Social distancing and hand washing will continue to be reinforced. Air filtration systems will continue to be utilized in classrooms and meeting spaces. All COVID-19 cleaning protocols will remain in place. District 6 will continue to provide free meals to all students regardless of family income. Classroom breakfast will continue and lunch will take place in cafeterias at most of the schools. We will continue to strongly recommend masks for unvaccinated populations in accordance with CDC guidelines. The pandemic is not over. We must remain vigilant to keep our community safe. If infection rates rise or we see outbreaks in schools, we may need to adjust these plans. Should the state or federal government issue new guidelines or health orders, we will be sure to comply and make the necessary changes. These decisions for public health guidance are being reviewed and made by individuals studying the public policy and scientific effects of COVID-19, and we will continue to rely on them to help us remain informed and prepared. Any infectious disease is scary, and please know that I share the same fear as you all. My son will be wearing a mask to school to protect himself, and my family will continue to do our part in keeping ourselves and our community safe. We as a family continue to think about this every day. However, I do believe that the district is heading in the right direction. I do believe that our students need to be in the buildings and continue on with what we would call our, quote, normal day. Our students struggled last year, our parents struggled last year, our community struggled last year. Let's create some sort of normalcy, and let's try and continue this school year and focus on the great and amazing things that our district does and amazing things that our students do each and every day. I appreciate all of our Greeley Evans District 6 community members, and I'm alongside all of you in hoping that we'll be able to fight this virus together and to be able to also return celebrating and recognizing the amazing things this district does outside of our work against this pandemic. So here we are, the last week before schools to begin. Let us welcome our smiling faced children, our happy staff, back into the buildings and teach them what it's like to be resilient, just as they have shown us over the past year. I appreciate each and every person in this room and in this community. If it weren't for all of you, we wouldn't be up here today. Again, I heard you, I hear you, I see you, and I feel you. Please know that I continue to be a strong advocate for each and every person in this community. Although our opinions sometimes may not align, I want you to know that, as always, safety is the number one concern of each and every student and staff in the district.
Thank you, Mr. Talley. Ms. Solis?
So several years ago, I was on a coalition called the Weld County Tobacco Free Coalition. At that time, we were working really hard to make it so you couldn't smoke in public places. When we brought this forward, we heard a lot of the same things that we heard today. It should be my personal choice if I smoke. It should be my personal choice if I may or may not get cancer. It should be my personal choice. If I do get cancer, I may survive, I may not. That's my personal choice. At the time on the coalition, I couldn't argue with that. It's true. It is their right. But what is not their right was to affect people around them with secondhand smoke and possibly cause health issues with that. That was our argument. I heard lots of people tell me there's not enough energy about this, Rhonda. You're going to get a lot of pushback. But we as community members were courageous because health was important and we knew it affected community members and it affected our children. We stood up. We asked the city of Greeley to take a vote on this, and they did. In 2003, it was passed by the city council that you can no longer smoke in public areas. And now today, we come to school, we have parents that come to our district, we have teachers that work here, and this is a tobacco-free zone because of the courage that we had to stand up for people's health. This is not a political issue for me. This is a health issue. And while I respect all the parents that spoke today, and I thank you for coming, because I know that was important and we needed to hear from you. And the question around vaccines, that is hard. And that is a parent choice, and I agree with you. And what I heard tonight is that there's a lot of parents that don't feel comfortable getting their kids vaccinated. And that's a reality, which means that if we have students in our district that are not going to be vaccinated, we must protect the other students, and that is by a mask. I am married to a man for over 20 years who lost a child. I've had to witness the worst pain possible And I never wished that on anyone. He was disabled and he had some health conditions. And every fall, I could see the panic rise in my husband because every time he got sick, it would almost kill him. And at the age of 14, he lived much longer than he was expected. He got a virus and he died. It changed my husband forever. And I know that I and my husband would stand on our head, wear a mask, walk backwards, do whatever we could so he can have one more day with his son. When I first came on the board, things were really rough here. There was a lot of staff that was upset, and they were traumatized, really traumatized. And we had a courageous board that said, no more. We're gonna make a really tough decision, and we're gonna stand together, and we're gonna change this district. So we made the hard decision to change who our superintendent was. I had a ton of people in here mad at me. I had lots of people trying to record me. I had people emailing me. I had people talking to the Tribune. Lots of people were upset with me. And I did it anyway. There was a time that we had a lawsuit against us from our union. And I and my fellow board members had a group of teachers that filled this room with no social distancing and filled that other room because they said that we didn't follow through on a promise. There was a contract that was unsustainable. And we as a board had to make a vote, a really tough vote that was hard, that affected our staff. At the time, my mom had passed away. But I came to that vote because I knew it was going to be so hard for my fellow board members to have the courage and make that vote. And I wanted to be here to support them. We changed the district by hiring a new superintendent. That superintendent brought in consensus decision-making. And that was really important. And why that was important is because we had some really tough conversations to have. We had some issues to solve, and we needed to be responsible for it as a whole. We all needed to take ownership of that. And during that consensus decision-making process, we got to have the conversation around contracts. And when we used to hate each other and talk about each other, we now sat down and problem solved. And I wish we could have done that with this. I wish we actually could have sat down and done consensus training and conversation around this issue, because that's really how important it is to me. And I know, Dr. Pilch, you mentioned that you didn't understand why there were so many people here and this really shouldn't have been a big deal. It is a big deal. And we heard from a lot of parents that think it's a big deal. I, as a school board member, thought it was a big deal. And that's why I've struggled so much with this. And I want to thank us board members today for having this tough conversation, because that's what I needed. When we did this last year, when we got together and we talked about bringing school together, we had the opportunity to talk about this and really figure out what is best for kids, what is best for the staff, and we dove deep. We talked about a lot of stuff. And in the end, we decided that it was best that kids be here in person. And I know we had some teachers really upset with us and worried and scared, and that was totally legitimate. And the only thing that made me confident in that decision was the safety protocols that we had in place. And masks were one of those. That's why I struggle so hard today. You know, when COVID first came out, we heard some community leaders talk about how this is a personal choice. We heard that. And that's how I actually first got involved. Because people were saying that at a leadership level, and we were seeing people die at the JBS meatpacking plant. For me, I struggled with that. And just when I thought that was over, recently, well, actually right now still, my friend has his mom in the hospital and she's doing dialysis right now. And so my friend checks in with me all the time and he says, did you know the nurse that's helping my mom with her dialysis? Her dad was one of the first workers at JBS to die of COVID. And it brought it all back. This isn't over, folks. The Delta variant is here. And while I agree with all parents that, you are the parent, we have a responsibility here in the school district to make sure and keep kids safe. It's here in our District 6 2030 plan. Safety, security, health. We have literally changed the way buildings look to make sure that they're secure. We have secure entrances because another big conversation, tough conversation we have to have is around school shootings. So we have changed the entrances, we have added cameras for a situation that may not even happen here. But the devastation of losing a child is so huge that we've put those practices in place. And it scared parents so much that I had people telling me teachers should have guns on them to protect their children. Well, now we know that masks could protect their children. I've been on this board 7.5 years, and I've fought for the same things. I've never wavered. I've never changed. And I've stood up and taken some really hard, courageous votes. In that 7.5 years, we've turned this district around. We've passed an MLO, and we passed a bond. When we went out to talk to community about the MLO and the bond, the first thing we talked about was security and safety. We all went door to door. We made phone calls. And security and safety was #1 issue in this community. So we made sure that we tackled that, we approached it, we had a plan for it, we put those in place. To me, practices around COVID are no different. And I know we have a lot of things to go off of from last year, but what we're dealing with right now is not like last year. We have a variant, the Delta variant, which is very different, and it's affecting children, and children are ending up in the hospital. And although I don't know what it's like to lose a child, I know how hard and helpless you feel when your child gets sick. I just got out of a work session where we talked about all the things we're going to do and the paid positions we're going to have to make sure we keep kids in school. That's amazing. We know that kids do better when they're in person learning. Wearing masks will keep kids in person learning. I don't want to go remote. I don't want to have to quarantine. I don't want parents to try and have to figure out how to pivot and take off of work because now their kid's at home and they don't have anyone else to be with their kid. And I can tell you, my kids are 31 and 28. I don't know if I could have done this in the type of work that I'm in. I work at a dental office. I wouldn't have been able to take time off to be with my kids, and I wouldn't have been able to bring them to my work. I don't know what I would have done. I don't have a large family. It was just me and my sister when I was raising my kids at first before I got remarried. I don't know how I would have done that. And I think all of you parents had done an amazing job during this time because I know it wasn't easy. I don't agree with not starting with masks. I do think that we will be having this conversation not too far in the future that we're going to go back to masks. And my concern is this whiplash decision of we're in masks, we're not in masks, we're in masks, we're not in masks, is sending the wrong message. I feel like we should have been deliberate, we should have been concrete, and we should have stayed with the communication because we knew the Delta variant was coming. So I am in disagreement with not going with masks. I do agree with parents that you should be able to decide if your child gets a vaccine and that it shouldn't be required. And I know it's tough to ask employees to be required. And to me, because of those, and because we know that there's some people that are just not going to get vaccinated, masks are the best choice. And it's the most equitable choice. Because we have kids who are under the age of 12 that are not able to get vaccinated. And some of them have those same issues of asthma and wearing glasses and all of those things. And their parents are scared. We also have staff and students that have medical reasons that they can't be vaccinated. Everyone deserves the opportunity to come to school in person and feel safe, secure, and healthy. And I do believe that masks are the most equitable way. We tell our kids what colors they can wear and what they can't wear. We tell them if you wear a hoodie, this is how you have to wear it. There are some schools that have uniforms, some don't. And I hear all the time from kids, I don't understand why I have to do this. I don't agree with this. I don't like this. I picked up one of my CASA kiddos. I get a phone call from the school because she was wearing a hoodie and it was the wrong color. And she told me, I don't think this is fair. Why can't I wear this? I'm not hurting anyone. This color is not hurting anyone. And I said, because it's a rule. That's the way it is. I'm saddened that we have to have this conversation because I wish we just cared more about one another. And if my wearing a mask just protected me, then that is a personal choice. But if me wearing a mask protects someone else, it stops being a personal choice and it's a responsibility. And Dr. Pilch, I have worked with you for several years now and have been one of your biggest cheerleaders. And I'm having a really hard time with this one. I have to be really honest with you. Because I don't believe that this is just a personal decision and personal choice. And I do believe that we're going to be forced into changing things fairly soon. And when we mix those messages, that makes it hard. But I appreciate all my board members. Again, thank you for letting me have this conversation with you because this was tough for me. It was emotional for me. And we just came out of a really traumatic year, so how could we not talk about it? How could we not have some of these conversations and hear from parents and hear their experiences and hear about their children? How could we not do that? How is this not important? And I know some of you may not agree with me. And I appreciate you coming in tonight. I know you love your kids. I know you love this community and you care about this district. And I say that to the board members also. I know you care about this district. I know you care about kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Solis. Mr. Hafley.
In 42 years of education, this is the most nuanced and challenging thing that I think I've ever faced. And I look at Dr. Pilch and I want to thank you and your cabinet and administrators and all of our staff for doing an incredible job during the last 18 months. I know that there's been a lot of sleep lost by everyone as we've tried to make all of our students and staff safe. And I have some challenges for you, please, Dr. Pilch. As you work with the emergency response team, I hope that you stay on top of things and continue to have the ability to help make decisions that will move our students as well as our staff into safer places as we move forward. Please be aware of our neediest students and have our administrators and staff know who they are so they understand what is occurring. One of the greatest things that we learned last year during this whole thing was the more we communicate and provide information about what is occurring, the more successful we were and the more comfortable our students and staff and family were. And to each of my board members, I am humbled to have worked with all of you. And at no point have I ever believed that you're not for our students. With every one of the decisions that you make, I know that our students and staff matter to you. But as we continue to move forward in this very, very challenging time, I think it's really, really important that we challenge each other with every decision that we make. And equally as important, make sure that we listen to one another to gain insight in why somebody says the things that they do. To the people who sent letters and spoke this evening, thank you. This community and Evans are incredibly important to me, and I appreciate the thoughts that were shared in each of those things. COVID is a horrific thing that has impacted each one of us in a myriad of ways during the last 18 months. And as we move forward, all I can do is hope and pray that as many people who are comfortable get the vaccinations and wear the masks that make them feel comfortable. And most importantly, instead of thinking in a narcissistic manner or a self-focus, that we think about others. Because that's one of the things that's bothered me most during the course of this COVID, is that it's I instead of we. I understand the collateral mask, no mask situation. I've spoken to countless teachers in the last 10 days that they want to come back and they want to have the opportunity to look their students in the eye and be able to create those relationships to allow them to move forward. And I understand the importance of that. But as we move forward, I hope and pray that the current positivity rate stays where it is, but I don't believe it's going to occur. And I need to look to Dr. Pilch and the emergency response team to make the appropriate choices if things become worse. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hafley. Ms. Mueller.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you to all the teachers, staff, parents, and community members who have reached out to each and every one of us through email, through text, through being here tonight to give your comments in person. Your input is so vital for the decisions we make. I cannot stress enough how difficult it is to make this decision about how to implement COVID protocols under ever-changing guidelines by the CDC, the federal government, the state government, the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, and other agencies. I just want to establish that I do believe COVID-19 is real and it is deadly. I do believe the COVID-19 vaccine is our best defense against this virus, and I strongly encourage everyone to go get the vaccine. I do believe other tools such as social distancing, hand washing, and wearing masks also help prevent the spread of COVID-19. I will admit I am torn about the appropriate COVID protocols, and especially with new scientific data and evolving guidance. I do remain concerned about the lack of access to the COVID-19 vaccine for certain groups, including our youngest students under the age of 12 and communities of color within our district. And I am worried about how we can address these disparities. And I believe our mission of inclusion means that we have to find every avenue to address these disparities. Since the CDC released its new recommendations on July 27th, I have given the recommendations regarding masks in school settings a great deal of thought. And while I agree generally with their recommendations, I at this time feel confident in bringing our students back to school face-to-face. I think it's an imperative, but I am still hesitant to call for a mask mandate due to the following reasons. The social emotional well-being of our students. Physical health is very, very important. And while I'm not a biologist or an epidemiologist, I am a social scientist. And I know how society is built through human interaction, socialization, and mimicked behavior. I'm concerned about how mask mandates impede that human interaction and impact our social, emotional health and well-being of our children. Mental health has been severely impacted by this pandemic, namely because of social isolation, and yes, masks play a role in that. Facial expression does mean a lot in social connection. And we must consider that reality as well. There's more than one reason and one way to die from this pandemic, and mental health concerns, including suicide, is one of those ways. I also think another reason is the challenge of enforcement. I am concerned about how any decision we make for a mask mandate will impact our teachers and school staff. I teach. It is difficult enough to try and teach content to people, to students, and to make sure you have clear communication in all that you do. We have spent the better part of a year wearing masks. I understand that within the schools. However, our earlier use of masks was largely due to a lack of any other preventative option against this virus. We didn't have access to the vaccine yet, and masks and social distancing were the only lines of defense against the spread of the virus. However, the vaccines are now here, and data, whether you believe it or not, shows they are very effective. In addition, since the mask mandate was lifted across the state by Governor Polis on June 1st, the community has now had 2 months of mask-free living. And I know, as a social scientist, it will be very, very difficult to enforce a mask mandate as effectively as before. I do not want our teachers and staff to become the mask police. It will most surely turn into a daily struggle between students, parents, and staff. It will impede learning. It will impact the relationship between teacher and student. While I am not currently in support of a mask mandate, I am in support of courtesy and kindness, respect, and human decency towards one another. That is something I have seen a lack of as well. We must listen to each other, and we must care about one another. I use the same language the CDC itself used in its latest recommendation, and strongly recommend that all teachers, staff, and students wear masks indoors, but primarily and especially our unvaccinated individuals. I believe we must have a strong culture of courtesy within our schools to make sure no one feels shamed about their choice to wear or not wear a mask. And I believe our administrators will do their utmost to make sure that that is instituted across all school campuses. But finally and foremost, we have approached this entire pandemic as a board and as a community in trusting in our leaders and in our administration to learn, to communicate, to work with each other, to come up with the best possible recommendations. Dr. Pilch, her cabinet, and school administrators are boots on the ground in the schools, teaching our students every day. And I trust them to know what is best for our community and our schools. I know they will pivot as recommendations at many levels will change. I do believe conditions will evolve, and we may have to change course, and parents must be aware that that is a possibility. Dr. Pilch and her staff have proven nimble and quick to respond to changing conditions, and I trust their ability to offer sound and valid recommendations. But finally, as a parent myself, I respect the role of our parents to make decisions about their own children's health and well-being. However, I implore you to be careful. I personally know how devastating regret can be.
to have a sick child and to realize you could have done more to prevent that from happening. Please do all you can to protect your precious children. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mueller. Vice President Pappas.
Well, I can, first of all, just say how humbled I am to be here at the table with all of you. I did write down comments, and I will read some of those, but I do value so deeply your thoughts, your comments, your beliefs, and everything that's been said tonight by board members. And I also greatly appreciate all of the people that came to speak tonight, all of the people that have reached out to us by email, people that have called, people that have texted. I really don't believe there's anybody that isn't experiencing some degree of anxiety right now. When we sat here last year and we were trying to make the decision to go in person, to go fully remote, we also were in the same position of what can we do that's the right thing to do? What should we do? And at that point, we listened to our district leadership. We listened to Dr. Pilch and her emergency response team, knowing that they were in constant communication with our health officials as identified tonight in the protocol presentation, and all of the ongoing communication that happens then and happens now. And last year, before we went to in-person learning, the district staff, including custodians, teachers, building administrators, everyone worked tirelessly to make sure that we were ready to have our kids start school in person. And as others have mentioned, that may not have been a popular decision for some people, but we made the decision knowing that we were basing that decision on quality, effective leadership and collaboration with public health officials. Unfortunately, we're here again, and I think that I personally believe that part of the reason we're here again having these conversations is because we all haven't been vigilant. We all haven't taken care of one another. I think we thought COVID was over. We got lax, and we just, including myself, I have family members that are not vaccinated either, and I respect that. I have family members that don't want to wear masks, and I respect that. But I do believe as a district, we are here because now we have to make the decision. What are we going to do with our kids this year? How are we going to ensure that they can come to school in a safe, secure, and healthy environment? What are we going to do? And I base my decision on the same parameters that I based my decision last year. I am listening to the leadership of Dr. Pilch, her emergency response team, the collaboration with the public health officials, the intense amount of work that has gone in at the building levels to put protocols in place. The only real protocol that has changed is not taking temperatures every day and not requiring masks. And I support the protocols that were presented tonight. I strongly support those protocols. But I will say that I might differ with other people in the fact that I think the word strongly recommend means strongly recommend. And I think that we have to ask ourselves, what can we do? What can we do as educators, as community members, as board members, as teachers? How can we make sure that we end this pandemic? And I think if we follow the recommendations that are highlighted in the protocols tonight, and we follow the strongly recommending, I think we can make that happen. And there will be times that there are quarantines. And I think the targeted quarantines are great. I hope they're going to be effective. We won't know that until we get into school. But if in fact we have a classroom or a school, or hopefully not the whole district, but if we have a group that has to be wearing masks, I hope that we can be respectful of that. And I hope that we can manage that in a respectful way and comply with those requirements so that everybody does feel safe, so that everybody, regardless of whether they choose to wear a mask or not, isn't shamed, doesn't feel like, oh my goodness, I'm different than other kids, I'm different than other teachers. We have to, as mentioned earlier by other board members, we have to realize that this is a collective problem. We are in this together. Our kids are excited to get back to school. At the back to school kickoff event on Saturday, there might have been a few kids that had to push a little bit, maybe some middle schoolers to say yes, they were excited to be back to school, but for the most part, kids are excited to be back to school. Their parents are excited to have them back to school. There were some parents and kids with masks, most did not have masks. There were people that in fact, all people were physically distancing, being respectful of one another. We have heard from so many people tonight. We have heard from people through, as I mentioned earlier, email communications and other forms of communication, social media, which I really don't think that that's necessarily the best way to give our opinions. But there are some people out there that haven't had the opportunity to contact us for whatever reason. Whether they feel they don't have access, whether they feel they can't come and talk to us, but those perspectives are valid. And we need to make sure that we're also paying attention to those perspectives, and that as a district, as a board, as a community, that we make sure that we are also reaching out to our entire community to make sure that we're listening to everyone. So in closing, I would just say that I respect the decisions tonight that were presented in the protocols. I respect the people that came tonight and shared your passionate feelings. I respect that. I just want us to think about what is best for our entire community and how we move forward for our kids. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pappas. And as Ms. Pappas said, it's a humbling thing to always go last when there's so many intelligent and passionate and well-spoken people sitting at this board table. I do want to thank you if you came tonight and spoke to us. We listen more than you probably think we would. We're always glad to hear from you, whether you come here and speak or email or text or call. I'm sure we've engaged with a number of people over the last week in so many different ways. So thank you. We do listen to your opinion. We thank you for being here. This only works when we trust one another. And honestly, this is a lot bigger than school systems. Our society only works when we trust one another. And, I can't tell you if you should get a COVID vaccine. Right? I have to ask my wife each time if I need to take Advil or Tylenol. I don't have any medical expertise to tell you if you should get a vaccine, but as Ms. Mash said, I'm pretty sure there's a medical professional in your life that you trust. Pretty sure that you have a doctor or a group of doctors that you go to, and I encourage you, because there is so much at stake, to go to them and ask, should I get this vaccine? Is it safe for me to get this vaccine? We've heard from parents, and I hope we've never given you the impression that we don't trust you, because we absolutely do. We trust you with your children and the safety of the children that they come in contact with. And we know we have to trust you. And I agree with Ms. Pappas that strongly recommend means strongly recommend. We are strongly recommending. We don't want to require you to do anything, but we strongly recommend that if your child is not vaccinated, that they wear a mask. We know that some, and we've heard from so many different stories, why some children can't wear a mask. Can't imagine being an English language learner. I used to live in a country where I didn't speak the language, and every conversation, every sentence was a struggle. I can't imagine being an English language learner and trying to learn with a mask where you can't see the lips and you can't hear very well. I know that there are social and emotional needs for certain children, and a mask is a severe barrier to that. But I also know that there are a lot of children that can wear masks. I have 5 children in this district, one who is too young to be vaccinated, and he will begin in a mask because he can. And so, but we trust you as parents, and I would ask that you trust us. And as we've said, Ms. Mash and Mr. Talley and myself have children in this district. We know the fears on all sides. Ms. Mueller just recently had a child graduate this district. Mr. Hafley and Ms. Pappas, they have taught practically every teacher in this district. Ms. Solis has worked tirelessly to bring vaccinations to children who might not be able to get those otherwise. We are people that love the kids and the teachers in this district. They matter to us more than anything. And so I pray I would ask that you trust us. You believe that whatever decisions we make, that we do actually have our students' best interests at heart. And I'll just say this, for me this decision is actually pretty simple, because it's not about what we should decide, but who should decide it. And Dr. Pilch, I just want to say I trust you. Trust you with my children's education and my children's safety and their health and social and emotional well-being and all the different competing interests and things that need to be balanced, and as Mr. Hafley said, nuanced. And I firmly believe this is not a board decision and shouldn't be a board decision, but an administrative one and an executive one, precisely because at the end of the day, it has to be executed. And it has to come down to a superintendent and a team of administrators and the principals and teachers working together. And so I trust you, and if there's anything I want this community to know, is that they can trust you too. And I think that's all I have to say. So, is there any other business before we move on to our next item? All right. Our next item on our agenda is the sale of some property. This is an action item that requires a motion.
I move that the Board of Education of Greeley Evans School District 6 approves the contract for the Grizzly Drive property and authorizes Chief Financial Officer Megan Sponso to sign any and all documents associated with this transaction.
Second.
Thank you both. Before we open this up for questions and comments from board members, Dr. Pilch, is there anything you would like to tell us about this?
Yes, thank you, President Matthews. I should just provide a little bit of context and explanation around this. So this is the land adjacent to the Northridge High School property that was previously where there was an oil well located, and PDC Energy donated this land to us. It's really not usable for us. It has a slope that doesn't really allow for us to create a field there. We had talked about possibly utilizing it for storage or transportation, but it is not zoned to allow for that. And so we've been approached by the developer that is building homes right there to the east and south of Northridge, and they would like to purchase that land. Mr. Henson did follow back up with the folks at PDC Energy to ensure that we weren't harming a relationship there if we entered into the sale of this land after having been donated to us, sharing that our intent would be to take those dollars from the sale of this land and to purchase other land that would prove to be more usable for us in another area of the school district. So I recommend tonight that you approve this sale and authorize Ms. Sponsler to sign on behalf of the board. And we will keep you posted on our plans for the purchase of that next piece of land. And we'll also keep PDC Energy folks informed of that as well.
All right, thank you, Dr. Pilch. Any questions from comments from board members? Or is everybody sufficiently tired out? All right, I don't see any. So, Ms. Green, will you give us a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Hafley?
Aye.
Mrs. Mash?
Aye.
Mr. Matthews?
Aye.
Mrs. Mueller?
Aye.
Ms. Pappas?
Aye.
Mrs. Solis?
Aye.
Mr. Talley?
Aye.
Motion carries 7-0.
Thank you, Ms. Green. We're to our final item tonight, and that is public participation. And we do some public participation on agenda items at the very beginning, and we save public participation for items that are not on our agenda for the very end. And we have we've thanked a lot of people who've come here tonight, but I especially want to thank Miss April Kramer because those people got to speak and leave at 6:15 or 6:30. You've been waiting patiently for another 2 hours in order to speak. And so, I might even give you a little more than 2 minutes if you pushed it. So Ms. Kramer, please come and speak to us now on the issue of teacher mental health.
Thank you so much. I was actually thinking this is where passion can be a strength and a weakness. I want to thank everybody for letting me speak today. I am a little disheartened that it wasn't on the agenda because it's something that I am very passionate about, and I think it needs to come to the very front of things. I actually wouldn't still be sitting here if it weren't for the numerous texts and support of my peers that I've been receiving all night. Hang in there, you got this. And my husband telling me, I know you got a long night tomorrow too. Just keep going, you got this. So the first thing I want to say is that you are looking at one of the faces of a person who has suffered from mental illness, receives treatment and therapy. I consider myself every day a survivor. Unfortunately, there are many teachers that I know who, just standing here and saying that's scary enough, then to let alone try to tell someone in your building, and you build those relationships. I've built 8 years at Maplewood. It looks like our new principal is gonna help me continue keeping that relationship going to take care of my mental health. But I struggled a lot during COVID. So I really didn't want to go last speaking, but it seems like with the community, it's actually a perfect funnel into what I feel is really needed. I am requesting a call to action. Teachers are at the forefront daily with your children. And if the entire purpose is for our children, then the teachers need to be taken care of. We spend all day with them, trying to provide an educational, safe, and healthy environment. But as the old saying goes, you got to put your oxygen mask on first. That's the problem with passion, is sometimes we forget. And for teachers, we forget quite a bit. Or we want to put them first, and we try to muscle through it till it's too late. Okay? It's not common to be recognized and applauded for your mental health maintenance. It's more likely to be recognized for your hard work and your passion, and that's the challenge that we take every day. As a teacher, I've built relationships over the last 8 years and have slowly trusted my peers in admin with my mental health struggles. 8 years. It's even difficult for me to talk to my family about it sometimes, and they're a very great family. I'm here today to ask that the district back up our administration this year by carving out time for school principals and admin in person and online to check in with their staff as a whole and create opportunities to communicate our needs and check in, see how we're doing, make us realize we're not the only ones. Give us chances to reach out to each other and say, hey, I'm here for you. Although we have numbers to call and links to click, and I've searched and searched and searched, what we really need is support from the district. Just as adults would be reminded on that plane to put their oxygen mask on first. To help others, we need to see a change that shows the district knows what really matters. If the kids matter, the teachers who watch them all day, keep them safe, educate them, love on them, treat them as they would their own children, should be cared for. Especially in order to teach successfully. I don't like to take a mental health day and know that maybe one of my kids want to talk to me that day. I want to come in healthy and not have a breaking point every single year. We have the tools in District 6 and the passion that we need. You guys have provided that for us. Our community has provided that for us. Clearly, parents who care are providing all of that for us. Our passion is what drives us to make a difference. However, mental health is the part that gives us the stamina to continue doing it.
Ms. Kramer, if you could conclude your comments.
I'm
if
all
that's
done.
Oh,
That was it.
wonderful.
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome, and thank you for being so patient tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mathis, can I say one thing?
Yes, sir.
I know that it's against, but I really feel the need that I need to say this. Ms. Kramer, I really, truly, truly from the bottom of my heart want to thank you for coming to speak with us. As everyone knows, mental health is my number one priority, and the bravery that you just showed by coming up and speaking of your own personal path and journey means a lot to me. And please reach out if there's any way that I can definitely support you. And I really, really appreciate your strength tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Talley. We actually do have one more person to speak, although it's going to be read by Ms. Crane. Ms. Crane, I'm going to time you this time. You got 2 minutes.
Good evening, board members. My name is Melissa Wheeler, and I have a 9-year-old daughter that attends school in your district and is about to enter the 4th grade. Last year was challenging for everyone. My daughter is an only child, and so the social effects were more severe for her than students that are lucky enough to have siblings at home. This summer was a great relief for her to be able to have sleepovers, summer camps, birthday parties, go to carnivals, and to see all of her friends' smiling faces. I've been so grateful with the school district's decision to allow masks to be a personal choice for each student and family in the upcoming school year. Last night I heard on social media that although it was not on the agenda, the board would be voting to require masks again and wanted to be able to share some of my concerns as a parent and community member. A district from the Global Mental Health Program at Columbia University, a study from the Global Mental Health Program at Columbia University stated, it's not until kids are about 14 years old that they reach adult skill levels in recognizing faces. By putting on masks, we take away information that makes it especially difficult to recognize others and read emotional signals. The effect leaves children less able to communicate and less able to understand each other. Adolescence is a crucial age for children to develop emotional and mental health skills, and school-age children are learning about themselves and exploring their own identities. Taking away the freedom of self-expression and the ability to read and understand nonverbal communication skills will no doubt be detrimental to the students long-term. According to the Center for Disease Control, from January 1st, 2020 through July 31st, 2021, 349 people under the age of 18 have died from COVID in the United States. Although any loss of life is tragic, the majority of these deaths had significant underlying health issues before catching the virus, and children with healthy immune systems are not at any significant risk of dying of COVID. The majority of students in your school district that rely on you to make decisions to protect them while in your facilities are more at risk of consequences from mental health problems than physical health issues related to COVID. Although I understand your desire to protect the few that may be at risk of physical complications from COVID, I ask you to consider the majority of the students over the few and the long-term mental, social, and psychological consequences of continuing these mandates will have on them. All teachers, faculty, and students over 12 It's the last sentence. Also have the option to be vaccinated and may continue to wear masks. I am just asking for choices for our children that do not have any other choices. Thank you for your time, Melissa Wheeler.
Thank you, Ms. Gray, and thank you, Ms. Wheeler. Once again, thank you to everyone who's come here tonight, who's shared their story and how this pandemic has impacted them and their hopes for their children in this next school year. We greatly appreciate the public participation that we've had tonight on so many different fronts and levels. But we are to the end of our meeting and just under 9 o'clock, and so this meeting is adjourned.